Chapter 168. It was still raining in Chengdao at night. The light raindrops fell to the ground in the wind. In the late night air, everything around seemed to be a little bit cooler. The mountain forest was slightly undulating in the wind and rain. Occasionally, some leaves fell with the wind. The sky was dark and gloomy. Walking in the forest at night, an indescribable sense of gloom and belonging lingered in one's heart like a shadow and never dissipated. In the grass that was covered with rainwater, a resolute figure was holding the sniper rifle in his hand with concentration. The black muzzle of the rifle poked out of the grass. His attention was completely focused as he carefully observed everything in his line of sight through the sniper scope. Position 16 is safe. In the dark, he gently wiped the rain off his face and said softly in Japanese. Position 17 is safe. 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 A series of silent reports came from the familiar voice. In the grass, the sniper's eyes flashed and he continued, "Be careful to hide." He reached out his hand and gently stroked the sniper rifle in his hand. His careful and gentle movement was like stroking his lover, and he couldn't let go of it. This was a sniper rifle that was rarely used in the military of East Island. It was more of a cannon than a gun. Its caliber of nearly 50 millimeters was enough to prove its terrifying power. This kind of gun, or cannon, was codenamed Holy Thunder in East Island. It could be said that it was the most powerful weapon that the special warfare system of East Island could equip its elites in batches. Holy Thunder was nearly 3 meters long and extremely heavy. It was undoubtedly a little inconvenient on the battlefield where snipers needed to move flexibly. But the heavy gun body and the great power made some sharpshooters who were confident in their marksmanship in East Island like it. Holy Thunder could only shoot 3 bullets in 5 minutes, but its superpower was enough to break the ice layer condensed by an ice-condensing realm expert with all his strength. This was a real killing weapon. But its shortcomings were as obvious as its advantages. Because of the excessive emphasis on power, Holy Thunder's shooting speed was so slow that many people couldn't accept it. All kinds of data showed that Holy Thunder's shooting speed could only reach half the speed of an ordinary sniper rifle. This speed was also fast, but it gave the opponent at least half a second to consider when dealing with an expert, which also tested the shooter's reaction speed and prediction accuracy. However, the reason why the Divine Thunder could be called a cannon was naturally not because of its ridiculously large body, but because of the Divine Thunder's lethality. The moment the bullet exploded, it could cover an area of at least 15 meters around it. Even an ordinary expert in the fire-flaming realm might be injured by a shot. In any case, this kind of gun, which had obvious advantages and disadvantages, was a real treasure in the whole of East Island. Except for the real elites, no one else could use it. He gently stroked the body of the gun and recalled the scene a few hours ago when he pulled the trigger and blew up the head of a woman 400 meters away. The ice wall was shattered by that shot, and the bullet pierced through the skull. Fresh blood and brain matter burst out together with the rain. The entire scene was filled with an extremely cold and ruthless feeling. It was said that they were elites of the special warfare system of Zhongzhou State. A few women, the stupid Shina Sao, actually wanted to rush over to take revenge. What a joke. She seems to be a very young woman. I wonder what she tastes like. As his thoughts ran wild, another shadow flashed in the corner of his sniping scope. His attention was suddenly focused, and he looked forward through the sniper scope. In his sight, the darkness was drifting away gently. In front of him, there was nothing but the falling rain and flying leaves. Was there something wrong with his eyes? He subconsciously turned the muzzle and looked around, hesitating whether or not he should sound a warning. "Here you are," a soft, almost murmuring voice sounded gloomily in his ear, abruptly and without any warning. The sniper in the grass shivered obviously. When he was highly focused, he was suddenly frightened. His first reaction was not to sound a warning, but to scream out of instinct. A palm had already reached over and covered his mouth. The palm squeezed his mouth tightly, and a silver dagger was almost stabbed into his throat at the same time. Puff! The blade of the dagger was slightly longer, and the tip of the knife went straight through his neck. Blood sprayed, and the dagger with cold light was suddenly retracted. Bang! In less than a second, a gunshot that shook the whole mountain forest suddenly sounded. The light of the silver dagger disappeared, and the figure disappeared at the same time. The bullet whistled from another direction and landed on number 16's position like a cannonball. Within a radius of more than 10 meters, all the grass was uprooted immediately. Number 16's body, which was not completely dead, was swallowed by the fire and turned into a pile of ashes in an instant. The whole mountain forest seemed to be completely alarmed. The gunshot thought for a moment and then disappeared. There was no report, no curse, only silence, as if the divine thunder had accidentally gone off because it was out of control. Charge, change direction, move forward, change position. The rain all over the sky tilted forward as he moved forward. There seemed to be a sudden storm sweeping through the mountain forest, and a shadow had already approached the second sniper like a ghost. Number 7, damn it, what are you doing? Swoosh. Before the second sniper could finish his words, a silver light suddenly flashed, and the shining dagger had directly pierced his head. The dagger was quickly pulled out. Before the blood that sprayed upward fell to the ground, the figure that did not seem to stop at all had already approached the third sniper. The slaughter in the night was like cutting grass. You're too slow. Li Tianlan said in a very calm tone, Senior Brother Jiang, are you a tortoise? A tortoise race with a hare? I like this story. If I were the tortoise in the story, I wouldn't mind. Puff. In his sight, the third sniper had already realized that something was wrong. He suddenly jumped out of the grass and intended to change his sniping position, but Li Tianlan's figure had already arrived in front of him. The two sides crossed each other in the darkness. In the whistling wind, the third sniper's chest suddenly sprayed a line of blood 2 or 3 meters long. Bang! In another direction, another gunshot sounded, but it instantly missed. You're willing to be a tortoise, but I'm not interested in being a rabbit. In the calm voice, the dagger instantly turned into a double sword. The sword light lit up, and the crisscrossed sword intent rushed into the forest. Another sniper had just turned around, and his body was directly torn in half by the sword energy. The fourth one. Bang, bang, bang. With Li Tianlan's calm voice, at least 3 sniper rifles around him shot at him at the same time. Fire, explosion. The divine thunder kept roaring, and a deep pit was blown up within a radius of tens of meters. The power is good, but do you want to kill me with these useless hands? Then you're bound to lose. The sword edge flashed in the air. Another head flew into the sky. The fifth, the moment the gunshot sounded, the converged sword edge suddenly shook, and the surrounding air suddenly twisted. The head in the air was crushed into a bloody mist by the twisted air before it fell to the ground. The sword intent condensed and did not disperse. Like a snow-white waterfall, it rushed over a distance of hundreds of meters in an instant. The whole mountain forest was silent for a moment. Well, the sixth one. Li Tianlan's tone was cold. Senior Brother Jiang, you're too slow. Remember our bet. If I win, you must tell me what Phoenix Pavilion is and about my father. I just said I would think about it. Jiang Shangyu's tone was calm. Li Tianlan smiled, but his eyes were full of cold killing intent. Although he was curious about Phoenix Pavilion, he did not intend to deliberately investigate it. But today, Jiang Shangyu's rhetorical question almost completely messed up his mind. Phoenix Pavilion? His father's death? Was there a relationship between the two? Jiang Shangyu did not say it clearly. He seemed to be deliberately leading him to do something, but Li Tianlan had no choice. Regardless of whether what Jiang Shangyu said was true or not, at least for now, he had to take this as a clue. Now this bet was also proposed by Li Tianlan. The competition was the number and speed of killing tonight. The winner had the right to make a request to the loser, and Li Tianlan's request was to make Jiang Shangyu spit out everything about his father and Phoenix Pavilion. He did not even expect Jiang Shangyu to agree to this matter. But for some reason, Jiang Shangyu hesitated and actually agreed. Although he only said he would think about it, and although Li Tianlan noticed something wrong at that moment, since the bet could be made, he had no reason not to win. Killing. Killing as fast as possible. The 7th one. The 8th one. On the other side of the jungle, Jiang Shangyu was also moving. His speed seemed to be much slower than Li Tianlan's. In Li Tianlan's hands, when the 8th sniper fell, the 5th one was beside him. However, his expression was still calm. His gaze occasionally shifted as he observed his surroundings without batting an eyelid. Still not making a move? So cautious? Now, he should be at his fastest speed. How long do you want to observe? As he spoke, he shook his fists hard and directly smashed the head of the 6th sniper. The forest in front of them was surrounded by a main national highway into Changdao. On both sides were hillsides and forests. At the foot of the mountain, East Island had set up a temporary and obscure headquarters. About 600 East Island elites were gathered here. There were less than 50 people in the headquarters, and the rest of them were scattered into the forest, making a nearly 20-kilometer-long path in the forest. If there were really elites of Zhongzhou state breaking into Changdao here, the hundreds of snipers in the forest would definitely be the most difficult point to deal with. This was also the main goal of Jiang Shangyu and Li Tianlan tonight. In addition to the main goal, the two also wanted to try to see if they could kill Nani Xiu, the commander of this area. Nani Xiu, the captain of East Island's Hanzhou Special Warfare Brigade, held the rank of lieutenant general, was in charge of everything in the special warfare system of Hanzhou Island. His status was similar to that of the director of the Provincial Special Operations Bureau of Zhongzhou State. However, East Island only had 3 big islands, and Nani Xiu could be in charge of one of them. His status was still higher than that of dozens of directors of the Special Operations Bureau of Zhongzhou State, and his strength was naturally higher. He was an expert at the peak of the thunder-shocking realm who was infinitely close to the half-step invincible realm. In the entire special warfare system of East Island, Nani Xiu could be said to be one of the well-deserved giants, whether in strength or status. In the current defense of East Island in Changdao, there were more than 10 experts of the thunder-shocking realm, and Nani Xiu was definitely one of the toughest bones. Nani Xiu sat in the headquarters. It would take him at least 5 minutes to go up and down the mountain. Li Tianlan and Jiang Shangyu planned to kill nearly 100 snipers in the forest with 2 or 3 rounds of harassment, and then they would join forces to besiege Nani Xiu. Even if they couldn't kill him, it would be a good result to make him seriously injured. As long as this defense line was loosened, it would be much easier to break into Changdao from here in the near future. The 15th. Li Tianlan's cold voice continued to ring. The 9th sniper in front of him fell down. Jiang Shangyu casually made a secret signal on a thick tree around him. Bai Yuming actually gave them 2 tasks. The first was to hunt. Just like what they were doing now, they tried their best to disrupt the defense line of Changdao so that the elites of Zhongzhou state could break out. The second was to unite. When everyone rushed into Changdao, countless people formed small groups, and it was extremely difficult to contact each other. It was also very difficult to gather these people together again. If they couldn't gather in Changdao, so many small groups would be annihilated by the East Island officials sooner or later. The 16th. Jiang Shangyu sighed slightly and looked around. It was still quiet. He sighed softly and said to himself, "You missed the best opportunity." He took a deep breath and said softly, "Let's go." Looking at the time, Nani Xiu is probably coming. Li Tianlan was silent for a while, then said, "Gather at the predetermined place and wait for the next action." "You're leaving?" Before Nani Xiu came, in the grass less than a kilometer away from Li Tianlan, a black figure aimed at Li Tianlan through the sniper scope. He sighed slightly and said, "What a pity." The black figure lay in the grass, perfectly integrated with the darkness and the grass. He lay motionless and watched Li Tianlan's figure disappear through the sniper scope. A playful smile gradually appeared on his face. "But I've probably observed your shooting pattern, little guy. So, you're going to die." In the wind and rain, he slightly pressed down the top hat on his head, and at the same time, pulled the old red scarf around his neck. 2 guns were quietly placed beside him, one long and one short. One looked ferocious, the other simple. In the entire dark world, these 2 famous guns could be said to be famous. Although they were not murderous weapons, they seemed to be not much worse than the 12 murderous weapons. It was hard to say whether these 2 guns made the Gun King of the Dark World, or the Gun King of the Dark World made these 2 guns. In the eyes of everyone in the Dark World, this man and these guns were completely one. Famous Gun Whisper. Famous Gun Grim Smile. In the darkness, the hand pulling the red scarf gently fell on the long gun. His eyes left the sniper scope, shining with calm and clear brilliance like cold stars in the night. Li Tianlan's figure had disappeared. He stood up from the bushes and followed them without batting an eyelid. In the dark world, no one knew his name. The Gun King, who could suppress a group of thunder-shocking realm experts on the killer list with his superb marksmanship and 2 famous guns, was now ranked 5th on the killer list. His code name was Heavenly Calamity. Chapter 169. It was nearly 1:00 in the morning. The whole mountain forest suddenly boiled with this fierce and swift raid. A large number of East Island elites rushed into the mountain forest and kept wandering in the forest. Whether it was East Island plotting against Zhongzhou State or Zhongzhou State plotting against East Island, this operation could be said to be a conflict in the dark world. It was not suitable for East Island to send troops to encircle and suppress them, but a large number of military superiors temporarily joined the special warfare system of East Island, which made East Island extremely abundant in manpower for a while. Changdao was not a small place. According to the map sent by Han Shishuan, there were at least 20 points around Changdao. With the nearby national highway as the core, this line of defense with a radius of more than 10 kilometers was just one of the points. This point was not even the one with the largest number of people. But this was not the one with the largest number of people. There were nearly 600 elites, the elites measured by the national level. Each of them was at least in the stabilization phase of the ice-condensing realm, which was not something ordinary soldiers could compare with. In just a few minutes, after more than 20 snipers fell silent one by one, all the elites suddenly moved as fast as they could. The mountain forest began to boil. Compared to the vast area of the mountain forest, the hundreds of people who suddenly appeared in the mountain forest were actually not many, but they moved extremely fast. They were the real elites. Once they took action, the whole mountain forest seemed to be filled with shadows and murderous intent in an instant. Li Tianlan ran wildly in the mountain forest along the way he came, leaving the falling rain and trees behind him. This road was the safest now. When he came here, there were a lot of hidden posts, but they had been cleared. Because he and Jiang Shangyu moved too fast, in just a few minutes, they directly retreated before the other side could react. The whole road could be said to be flat and peaceful. To be exact, East Island set up a total of 17 points of defense in Changdao, and the mountain forest that Nani Xiu was in charge of was one of them. There were not many people, but because Nani Xiu was a superior who was infinitely close to the half-step invincible realm, it could be said to be one of the most difficult points to deal with. Li Tianlan and Jiang Shangyu's plan was very simple. They intended to use 2 days to cause great chaos in this extremely critical defense point. On the first day, they naturally killed nearly 100 snipers here. Holy Thunder could be said to be the most famous killing weapon in the East Island military. A single one could pose a certain degree of threat to a fire-flaming realm expert. When a large number of Holy Thunders were concentrated and fired at the same time, even a thunder-shocking realm expert couldn't escape. At this time, there were at least 30 Holy Thunders in this forest, and dozens of sniper rifles with slightly less power. If all these people were killed, the casualty rate of the elites of Zhongzhou State breaking out from here would be greatly reduced. On the first day, he would kill the sniper here. On the second day, he would try to assassinate Nani Xiu. At the very least, he would be seriously injured. If this plan could be successfully completed, then Li Tianlan and Jiang Shangyu's task of destroying this key point would be considered completed. Their mission was to hunt and kill, and their main goal was to create as much chaos as possible in some key defense points, reducing the pressure on their compatriots to break out of the encirclement, and not to kill everyone in these defense points. And they couldn't do it. Even if 100 people besieged Li Tianlan and Zhang Shangyu, Li Tianlan wouldn't be able to escape, not to mention that there were 600 elites above the ice-condensing realm at this point at this time. 100 elites in the stabilization phase of the ice-condensing realm gathered together. In the drizzling weather, the power of these 100 people could almost instantly condense an ice wall with a thickness of more than 100 meters. With a thickness of more than 100 meters, it was definitely more exaggerated and solid than any so-called solid fortress or city wall in history. Li Tianlan had wind and thunder veins, but he wasn't an immortal. No matter how sharp his sword intent was, no matter how hot his flame was, and even if he had 10 wind and thunder veins in his body, it was impossible to completely destroy this 100-meter thick ice wall in an instant. Moreover, once real martial arts masters fought, it would often be a chaotic scene of light and shadow, flying sword intent, ice and fire intertwining, air and lightning lingering. The scene looked gorgeous and chaotic, and the destructive power was also extremely shocking. But at the end of the day, whether it was the chi-controlling realm, the ice-condensing realm, or the fire-flaming realm or the thunder-shocking realm, those seemingly gorgeous means of attack were actually substances that vibrated in the air with human strength. The chi-controlling realm vibrated the air with physical strength. The ice-condensing realm instantly condensed the moisture in the air with physical strength. The fire-flaming realm evaporated the moisture in the air and started a fire with tyrannical strength in the dry air by friction. To put it bluntly, this seemingly magical thing only relied on two things: great power, focused will. If one's power was not strong enough, he couldn't enter the 4 realms of martial arts. If one's will was not focused enough, he couldn't enter the 4 realms of martial arts either. The moment a master attacked, there would be ice and fire, which were the best embodiment of their absolute power and focused will. As for power and will, they were consumables. Although they could be replenished, if they were consumed too much at once in a short time, it would still have a fatal impact on their combat effectiveness. With Li Tianlan's current strength, the siege of 100 ice-condensing realm elites, even without considering the desperate thickness of the ice wall, could drag Li Tianlan to the point where he seriously lacked both power and will. At that time, Li Tianlan could only rely on his fists and feet. Even because of the loss of power, he was not even as good as an ordinary master who had not yet entered the 4 realms of martial arts. Li Tianlan and Zhang Shangyu could barely be said to be the peak power of the young generation in the dark world. But it was almost impossible for this kind of power to kill hundreds of elites in a short time, including several fire-flaming realm experts and experts who were infinitely close to the half-step invincible realm. In 2 days, they could get rid of the snipers here, and it would be best if they could seriously injure Nani Shou. That was the limit. And this was just point 1. Point 1 was named by Li Tianlan and Zhang Shangyu. It was located in the mountain forest in the south of Changdao. Point 2 was in the east. According to Li Tianlan and Zhang Shangyu's plan, it would also take 2 days to get there. Point 3 was the trickiest. It was located in the west of Changdao. It could be said to be the most heavily guarded place in East Island. Several thunder-shocking realm experts were all in that direction. And most of the small groups that were being chased in Zhongzhou State would enter Changdao from that direction. More than 10 defense points were all in the west of Changdao. Li Tianlan and Zhang Shangyu hadn't confirmed which defense point was point 3, but they had left the most time for point 3. 3 whole days passed. As for point 4, there was no point 4. 3 points, 1 week. The elites of Zhongzhou State would definitely break into Changdao within a week. As for those who didn't come after a week, there was basically no hope. The surrounding trees were left behind, and the pursuers were getting further and further away. Li Tianlan kept moving forward with a serious look on his face. His dressing had changed a lot. A dark gray night suit almost covered his whole body. What was even weirder was that he wore a pair of sunglasses that could almost cover half of his face on the bridge of his nose. In the night, the sunglasses kept flashing, reflecting everything around him to Li Tianlan's sight. This was a pair of sunglasses with many functions: ranging, reconnaissance, positioning, navigation, thermal imaging, signal jamming, and to a certain extent, it even had a certain bulletproof function. In an unfamiliar environment, these were undoubtedly the most practical things, especially the thermal imaging and ranging functions. Looking for a sniper with this thing was like catching a firefly in the middle of the night. Every time he caught one, he would be able to catch one. Gray clothes, sunglasses, silver sword, silver spear. Li Tianlan finally took off all the camouflage for the sky attack. For tonight's action, he carried the sky attack that the Dongqing clan gave him on his back, with 2 bullets in it. 2 bullets. It didn't sound like much, but when Thunder God gave the sky attack to Li Tianlan, there were no more than 20 bullets in it. During the days when he was chased by my Shiranui, Li Tianlan had used up 5 bullets. At close range, the power of the sky attack combined with this special bullet was simply unparalleled. Li Tianlan shot 5 times, and 3 times he missed. But the 2 thunder-shocking realm experts he hit died on the spot without exception. The holy thunder of East Island was a killing weapon, but compared with the sky attack, it was nothing. I've gotten rid of them. In the darkness, Jiang Shangyu's voice rang out. How about you? He killed fewer people than Li Tianlan, which meant that he didn't go deep into the forest as Li Tianlan did, so it was naturally less difficult for him to retreat. I'm almost there. Li Tianlan said calmly, let's meet at the predetermined place. The second raid will be carried out in 2 hours. You're too slow, and they're getting more and more vigilant. If you still don't show your real skills in the next action, our results will be worse than now. Jiang Shanyu chuckled and said nothing. Bang! Li Tianlan wanted to say something more, but a fierce and loud gunshot suddenly rang in his ears. In an instant, Li Tianlan didn't even have time to think. He almost instinctively changed his position with the shadow. Because the shadow appeared too quickly, it only appeared less than 5 meters behind him, but it was enough to make the opponent's shot completely miss. Li Tianlan's cold eyes swept slightly. 100 meters ahead, a red blurry figure directly appeared on the lens of his sunglasses. The opponent missed the shot, jumped up from the hiding place, turned around, and ran. Li Tianlan sneered. Without hesitation, he directly chased after him. Extreme sprint. The distance between the 2 sides was instantly shortened. The strength of the sniper in front of him was obviously not comparable to that of an ordinary sniper. He could be said to be the elite of the elites, and his speed was close to that of a fire-flaming realm expert. But as Li Tianlan's speed got faster and faster, he became more and more nervous and looked back from time to time. 50 meters. 30 meters. 20 meters. The distance between the 2 sides was getting closer and closer. There was a flash of killing intent in Li Tianlan's eyes, and a shadow directly appeared in front of the sniper. He raised the long sword in his hand. The moment the sword light lit up, what appeared in front of Li Tianlan was a face without any panic or fear. The sniper's eyes were unusually calm, but his expression was full of ferocity and cruelty. The sword light fell. The sniper raised his arm at the same time. One punch. Boom! In the raging killing intent. In an instant, there was lightning rising in the whole forest, shining and glaring. Chapter 170. There was no sign. The feeling of fatal danger came suddenly. For Li Tianlan, he just wanted to get rid of a sniper lying in ambush on the periphery. Once there was serious chaos in the defense point led by Nani Xiu, this point would become the best breakthrough point for Zhongzhou State elites to break into Changdao from this direction. Nani Xiu and the sniper here were the most important targets for Li Tianlan and Jiang Shanyu. The former was strong enough to crush most of the elites sneaking into East Island at his peak, and the power of the latter's long-range shooting could not be ignored. If the ordinary elites lying in ambush in the jungle could only chase the elite soldiers of Zhongzhou State, then the sniper and Nani Xiu could kill the people of Zhongzhou State. This was the advantage of strength and firepower. Li Tianlan and Jiang Shanyu were almost unafraid of most of the thunder-shocking realm experts when they joined forces. But in the face of Nani Xiu, they didn't even have the confidence to seriously injure him. That was why they paid special attention to the action of eliminating these snipers. Now on the way back, Li Tianlan found a fish that they hadn't found before. What reason did he have not to take action? So Li Tianlan didn't think much at all. In the face of the sniper's escape, he took action as fast as he could, and the first move was a killing move. For a man like him who was almost invincible in close combat, a sniper in close combat was a non-entity. In the air, the thunderous gunshots swept through the forest. Before the gunshots died down, the shining lightning had suddenly enveloped the nearby forest. Within a radius of more than 10 meters, more than a dozen trees were directly turned into a pile of charcoal at the moment the lightning lit up. The fleeing sniper was wrapped in lightning. He sneered, and the lightning around him formed a big net in the air, directly shrouding Li Tianlan. Boom! In the clear and strange roar, the lightning crisscrossed, and everything around it became blurred. There was only light, dazzling light. The ant in his mind suddenly turned into a dormant tiger. In the vast expanse of light, Li Tianlan could almost clearly smell the smell of death. In a hurry, Li Tianlan just took a step back instinctively. His whole body tightened, and a large ice wall nearly 5 meters thick wrapped around him. Countless flames were brewing inside the ice wall. Ice and fire intertwined. It exuded a kind of cold and almost violent heat. Lightning flashed. The ice wall, which was more than 5 meters thick, completely collapsed at the first moment. The fire inside the ice wall roared and surged out, but it was directly obliterated in a large area of lightning. The broken ice layer flew out. Li Tianlan's figure swayed slightly. At the moment when the lightning was about to envelop his body, his figure had already appeared on a piece of broken ice more than 10 meters away. Desperate chase, shadow symbol formula, night walking. In terms of explosive force alone, the unique skills of the Li family might be a little worse than those of the Wang family of Beihai. But in terms of flexibility and speed, the unique skills of the Li family were truly superior. In this respect, neither the Wang family of Beihai nor Kunlun City could compare with them. No one could imagine how flexible Li Tianlan, who had all the body movements in the map of God of War, could be without seeing it with their own eyes. The lightning shot forward in a straight line, and countless flames and ice shards disappeared in the blinding light. The thunder-shocking realm expert disguised as an ordinary sniper grinned hideously. He stared at Li Tianlan, who was more than 10 meters away, and sneered. How many times can you hide? He moved his body casually and strode forward. Li Tianlan's eyes narrowed tightly, and there was no emotion on his face. His eyes were fixed on the thunder-shocking realm expert in front of him. Although he had guessed it in his heart, he still couldn't believe it. Who are you? He paused and said in a cold tone. Nani Xiu of Benzhou. The moment the lightning flashed again, Nani Xiu's striding figure suddenly accelerated and took off. His figure rushed into the air more than 10 meters away. Like a big bird, he swooped down on Li Tianlan with all his strength. In the lightning, Li Tianlan had time to observe the face of the East Island Special Warfare Giant for the first time. Nani Xiu was not tall, about 1.7 meters tall, which was in line with the standard of East Island men, but his body was extremely strong. His ferocious-looking face looked a little pale in the lightning, but it added a little evil. Extremely bright light kept blooming around him, which was an almost irresistible force. Who would have thought that Nani Xiu, one of the giants of the special warfare system of East Island, would ambush a young man here regardless of his identity? At such a close distance, even if Li Tianlan's body movement was unparalleled in the world, there was almost no hope of escape when there was a gap of nearly 2 realms. The distance of more than 10 meters was shortened in an instant. Nani Xiu rubbed in the air, and the air whistled and twisted at the extreme speed. Flashes of lightning burst out all over him. The lightning spread rapidly toward his arms. The two sides were less than 5 meters apart. Nani Xiu's arms shook, and all the lightning suddenly gathered on his arms. The lightning burst out, and the light extended in his hands. As he waved his arms, before Nani Xiu's body could get close to Li Tianlan, two dazzling and dangerous bolts of lightning had already struck Li Tianlan's head. Fierce, swift, and ruthless. It all happened in a second. Li Tianlan only had time to condense a shadow not far away from him. Two parallel flashes of lightning had already crisscrossed between Nani Xiu's hands. The light flashed in the air, and wherever it passed, the air was completely torn apart. The two flashes of lightning crisscrossed and fell. The ghastly and terrible killing intent rose and fell in the mountain forest. Li Tianlan turned slightly and had already switched places with the shadow 20 meters away. Nani Xiu's body was still in the air. Li Tianlan raised his palm slightly. Two flashes of lightning passed through the shadow of nothingness and fell to the ground with a crash. In the time it takes for a spark to fly off a flint, everything in the mountain forest seemed to be strangely still for a moment. Fallen leaves, raindrops, crushed ice, and flames suddenly stopped. In less than half a second, the lightning that landed on the ground suddenly began to expand amidst a violent roar. A large amount of lightning shot up into the sky, and there were also lightning that flowed and spread on the ground like water. All the stillness disappeared completely, like a painting that was violently torn apart. The trees and the ground within a radius of more than 50 meters shook violently in the surging lightning. The broken trees and turf flew up along with the soil. The sharp light enveloped everything in the vicinity, and then it was the most barbaric destruction. Nani Xiu was in the air. His body was completely wrapped in lightning. Like a flash of lightning, he rushed toward Li Tianlan without a pause. The rain had completely disappeared, leaving only the lightning raging in the mountain forest. Switch places. Switch places. Switch places again. Three shadows almost lined up in a straight line behind Li Tianlan. Li Tianlan's figure kept flashing, and in the blink of an eye, he moved back nearly 100 meters, but he could not get out of Nani Xiu's attack range. There was a gap of nearly 2 realms between them, and the gap in strength was enough to make up for the lack of body movements. Nani Xiu's body in the air had almost become a ball of light full of lightning. Wherever the ball of light passed, there was a continuous burst. The two of them, one advancing and the other retreating, almost instantly opened up a flat path of 100 meters in the mountain forest. Li Tianlan stopped abruptly. In the face of his almost irresistible power, he stopped. An ice wall with a thickness of more than 10 meters suddenly appeared around him. The moment the ice wall appeared, Nani Xiu, in the lightning, vaguely saw the silver human emperor turn into a long sword. The young heavenly son from Zhongzhou state clenched the hilt of the sword and raised his eyebrows slightly. He still looked to be in a sorry state, but under the illumination of the lightning, his eyes suddenly became fierce. It was an indescribable temperament, and there seemed to be a kind of arrogance and domineering aura that seemed to look down on the world. The ice wall was completely formed. Their line of sight was separated. Between heaven and earth, a vast and crazy sword intent that was almost boundless and empty suddenly rose up in the lightning. Nani Xiu sneered. Although his strength was higher than Li Tianlan's, the latter's body movement was absolutely exquisite. If one chased and the other fled, Li Tianlan estimated that he could survive for a long time. But the other stopped to fight desperately, which was simply courting death. The lightning shrouding him within dozens of meters kept moving forward. Nani Xiu gave a long roar, and the lightning directly condensed into a huge blade surrounded by light with him as the center. The blade hung over Nani Xiu's head. The light was bright, like a blue cold moon shining with pale light. Facing the ice wall more than 10 meters thick, Nani Xiu, with a cold expression, suddenly swung down with one hand. The blade, like a cold moon, surging with endless lightning, cut through the air and slammed hard on the thick ice wall in front of him. Boom! For a moment, the whole forest seemed to shake violently. The lightning, which was condensed to the extreme, cut through the ice wall without any hindrance, and the broken ice flew high into the sky. Almost at the same time, Li Tianlan's fierce and crazy voice rang out. Stop! The air raged by the lightning twisted violently, and even the ice flying in the air stopped abruptly. Only the blade surrounded by lightning still moved forward, but it slowed down for a moment. But a moment was enough for Li Tianlan. Under the sharp light of the lightning, Li Tianlan took a step forward, and his body suddenly became illusory. The blade condensed by lightning cut through Li Tianlan's shadow, but his real body with the sword had already arrived in front of Nani Shou. Along with his real body, there were two other shadows that looked exactly like him. Li Tianlan's shadow formula was far less flexible than Tribulation's. Now he could only condense 3 shadows. But to be exact, the third shadow could only change positions and had no attack power at all. 3 shadows plus his real body could fool around with his opponent unscrupulously when facing a well-matched opponent. But when facing an expert like Nani Shou, who was much stronger than him, it was the safest way to leave the shadow that could only change positions in the distance. 1 step. Li Tianlan came to Nani Shou almost in 1 step, dozens of meters away. The Buddhist incantation of 9 words, the flash formula. In Tribulation's Buddhist incantation of 9 words, the shadow formula was the most flexible body movement, the crack formula was the strongest explosion, and the flash formula was the fastest speed. The dried-up rain fell again in the night, gently beating on the forest. On the open space in the forest flattened by the lightning, Li Tianlan's eyes were unprecedentedly focused and sharp. At the same time that the layer of ice shattered, his aura began to skyrocket at an astonishing speed. The stabilization phase of the fire-flaming realm. The peak of the fire-flaming realm. It continued to rise. As Nani Shou's pupils shrank instinctively, Li Tianlan raised his long sword and stabbed it straight into the sky. Boom! A dull roar in the air flashed and died away. The rain falling around them was directly shattered by the violent sword energy. The 2 shadows followed Li Tianlan and raised their swords at the same time. Li Tianlan's face was pale. His rising aura almost fell to its lowest point in an instant, but the bright sword light pierced the night, shining fiercely and violently in the dark forest. The majestic and vast sword intent rose out of thin air, as if covering the sky. The rain falling from the sky did not fall for a moment, but all rolled back into the air. The killing intent in the forest converged. Only the sword light fell from the sky with the majestic and ethereal sword intent. The temperature in the air became extremely hot, and there seemed to be a dim yellow light in the darkness. Then the light faded. In the vast world, the sword light shone above. The sky within a radius of nearly 100 meters seemed to shine with an extremely dazzling and blurred color under this sword. The sword intent was like fire, and its momentum was like thunder. At this second, Li Tianlan's aura was weak, but his solemn figure holding the sword was truly peerless, with a kind of demeanor that could overturn everything. The demeanor of a sword. There was only sword light above. But Li Tianlan became a sword. The strongest sword. This sword had completely surpassed the fire-flaming realm, but it was still a step away from the thunder-shocking realm. Forcibly restoring his strength beyond the fire-flaming realm without touching the thunder-shocking realm was Li Tianlan's most powerful sword move without damaging his foundation. All the power. All the sword intent. And all the outbreak. His indifferent voice filled the air, weak, but with a high majesty. Break. He held the long sword in his hand tightly, and without any hesitation, he slashed hard at Nani Shou. The 2 shadows beside him also slashed down at the same time. Chapter 171. There's another chapter ahead, 2 chapters in a row. Brothers, don't miss it. The sword slashed down. In Nani Shou's roar, lightning lit up all over his body in an instant. In the air, Li Tianlan's body swayed slightly, and he had already switched places with the 3rd shadow dozens of meters away. His long sword didn't hit Nani Shou, but the illusory and colorful sword light in the air had already fallen straight toward Nani Shou. The sword light and the lightning merged. Nani Shou's not tall but extremely strong body shook violently. There was a sudden explosion in the air, and a wave of air visible to the naked eye surged and spread with Nani Shou as the center. His body hung in the air without landing, but there was a deep pit nearly 20 meters in diameter under his feet. A lot of smoke and dust flew up. Only the lightning in the air was still shining, unextinguished. Now! Li Tianlan's eyes lit up, blood gushing from the corners of his mouth. Now! Almost at the same time, in the grass less than 300 meters behind Li Tianlan, Heavenly Calamity, who was fiddling with his red scarf, also flashed slightly. At this moment, Li Tianlan had used all the shadows. This was the best chance. His hands fell directly on the sniper rifle named Grim Smile in front of him. The bullet was loaded. Aim! At the same time, Li Tianlan took off the sky attack from his back. The wind and rain filled the sky. He stood where he was, and the muzzle was aimed directly at Nani Xiu in a lot of smoke and dust. He stepped forward and raised the muzzle slightly, shooting in a standing position. The smoke and dust spread. At a distance of tens of meters and hundreds of meters, Li Tianlan and Heavenly Calamity twitched the corners of their mouths at the same time. They pulled the trigger. Bang! 2 dull gunshots, like a low roar, rang out almost at the same time. The sounds were mixed and almost completely merged into one. Li Tianlan aimed the muzzle at Nani Xiu. Heavenly Calamity aimed the muzzle at Li Tianlan. The dull sound reverberated in the mountains for thousands of meters. The sky attack's long and narrow bullet with strange patterns rushed straight out of the muzzle. A tongue of flame nearly half a meter long spurted out of the muzzle, and the bullet had already shot toward Nani Xiu with a violent whistling sound. At this moment, all the air in front of Li Tianlan seemed to become a tangible paper or canvas. The bullet rushed through the air, completely condensing, twisting, and compressing all the air nearby. A huge vortex with a diameter of nearly 3 meters suddenly took shape in front of him. Under the huge recoil, Li Tianlan's back leg shook violently. He, who was in a weak state, managed to fire a shot, but his back leg was pulled by the vortex in front of him. Li Tianlan, who was already seriously injured, spat out a mouthful of blood and didn't even have the strength to move. The sense of fatal danger behind him was clear. It was almost at his back in an instant, approaching the center of his back. It was like a wave of fire with sharp bullets, piercing through the night, piercing through the wind and rain, easily tearing apart the boundary between life and death, like the grim smile of the Grim Reaper, directly approaching his heart. Death was at hand. Li Tianlan looked calm and didn't even look back. All of his strength had been used up. He was truly powerless against the approaching death behind him. Li Tianlan's eyes were as calm as water. There was no unwillingness or bitterness, only some attachment and reluctance. Death seemed to drag on time. Everything in his life emerged in his mind. It was not until this moment that Li Tianlan suddenly realized that there was really nothing to remember in his life. In addition to those desperate training, there was only the guilt for the Li family's cemetery and the reluctance to part with Qin Weibai. That perfect face appeared in his mind. Her voice, her smile, and her every movement were all so clear. I really want to see her again. Li Tianlan closed his eyes gently, and the trace of attachment in his eyes gradually disappeared. He closed his eyes. There was darkness in front of him. There was dead silence in his perception. Is this death? But Li Tianlan suddenly opened his eyes. In his sight was still the mountain forest destroyed by the battle. But the sense of fatal danger behind him was gone, the heat was gone, the vortex in front of him was gone, and even the lightning flashing on Nani Xiu dozens of meters away had completely disappeared. There was one more person in front of Li Tianlan. It was a slender man, about 1.8 meters tall. He looked like a young man, but also like a middle-aged man. In the night, he wore a white windbreaker, the corners of which fluttered gently in the night wind. In the darkness, Li Tianlan could not see his face clearly. He could only vaguely see that he seemed to have a face of unknown age. A somewhat strange face. It was not ugly, but a kind of handsomeness that chilled people's hearts. He seemed to be an Oriental. A handsome and even enchanting Oriental. He looked down at Li Tianlan. His eyes were bright. They were clear and cold, without any emotion. Finally, he slowly opened his mouth. His soft and cold tone echoed in Li Tianlan's ears. It was English. Li Tianlan frowned. He couldn't understand a word. The positioning device in his ear had a translation function, but at this time it was silent and seemed to be broken. Looking at Li Tianlan's silence, the enchanting man slightly raised his eyebrows and changed to Japanese. Li Tianlan sighed slightly and said with a headache, "Can you speak human language?" He immediately realized that his tone was a little disrespectful. He shook his head with a wry smile. "I don't mean anything else. Are you an invincible realm expert?" A smile flashed in the eyes of the enchanting and handsome man. But even if it was a gentle emotion, there was also a trace of coldness in his eyes. "No. Just a little bit. Just a little bit." This time, he spoke in perfect Chinese. Li Tianlan raised his eyebrows slightly. Although he knew it was impossible, he couldn't help asking, "Are you from Zhongzhou State?" The man's eyes flickered slightly and he shook his head. He shook his arm and said softly in that cold tone that sounded a little chilling, "Well, the elite of Zhongzhou State, I robbed you of your military exploits, but I saved your life. You don't mind, do you?" Only then did Li Tianlan find that the enchanting man was holding a bloody head in his hand. Blood kept dripping from the head, but there was no blood on the man's snow-white windbreaker. The head swayed in his hand, and its eyes were wide open, as if it was extremely frightened before death. Li Tianlan's eyes narrowed slightly. That was Nani Xiu's head. Nani Xiu, who was infinitely close to the half-step invincible realm. What on earth happened at that moment just now? Nani Xiu died, and the sky attack's shot was blocked. Similarly, the shot behind him, which was no weaker than the sky attack, was also blocked. And all this seemed to happen at the same time in a second. The man who did all this was not an invincible realm expert yet. Just a little bit? How much was this little bit? Li Tianlan's mind was a little confused. He rubbed his forehead. After escaping from death, he instinctively wanted to speak, even if what he said was nonsense. Pointing to the head, he asked, "Did you kill Nani Xiu?" "Yes." The devilish man had a cold smile on his face. "This is one of my main goals this time. Originally, I wanted to kill all the elites of East Island here. Slaughtering and whatnot, isn't it exciting to think about it? But there are already 3 strong guys fighting over there. I came here in advance, just in time to see this wonderful battle. Your sword move is good, and that shot is not weak either. But you can't kill Nani Xiu, so I can't be considered robbing your military exploits. Well, besides, I saved your life." Li Tianlan shook his head with a wry smile and said, "Anyway, thank you. You don't have to." The man in white shook his head and sighed. "I always feel like I'm taking advantage of you. So," he thought for a moment, reached into his arms, took out a small bottle, and threw it to Li Tianlan. "If you trust me, eat it, and it will help you recover a little combat strength. Besides, I'll tell you who wanted to kill you this time, and then we'll call it even. How about that?" Li Tianlan froze for a moment, holding the small bottle in his hand, and kept silent. He didn't doubt what poison was in the bottle. The man was obviously a super expert who was only half a step or even a little step away from the invincible realm. It would be a piece of cake for him to deal with him now, so there was no need to poison him. There was no doubt that it was healing medicine. What he doubted was the man's motive. The expert of the half-step invincible realm in front of him seemed a little too easy to talk to and also a little too easygoing. They met by chance, and the man gave him healing medicine when he had saved his life. This kind of kindness made Li Tianlan instinctively hesitate. He couldn't kill Nani Xiu with that shot just now, so Nani Xiu didn't rob him of his military exploits. This was a truth that both sides understood. Now it was he who owed Nani Xiu a big favor, but Nani Xiu still looked apologetic. What was going on? Li Tianlan looked up at the strange and cold super expert in front of him. This man really didn't look like a good person. "You don't want to eat it?" The man in white raised his eyebrows slightly and smiled playfully. I just can't figure out why. Li Tianlan shook his head. Without hesitation, he poured the potion in the bottle directly into his mouth. The potion was a little bitter, but the moment it entered the abdomen, it was extremely hot, and it seemed that his physical strength began to recover little by little. It's very simple. Do you really think you're a nobody? You're famous in the dark world. I can't afford to offend that crazy woman, Samsara. Even Our Highness doesn't want to offend her. If she knows that I robbed your military exploits and left you alone when you're injured, maybe that crazy woman will fight with Our Highness. Damn it, we can't afford to offend her, can't we? I'll stay here for 10 minutes. When you recover a little, I'll leave. We don't owe each other anything. I've done my best. The man shrugged his shoulders coolly. This was a standard westernized gesture, but his Chinese was extremely fluent. Samsara, can't afford to offend, crazy woman. Li Tianlan narrowed his eyes and looked at the man in white in front of him. I wonder which force you belong to, Your Excellency. The man in white's face froze slightly. He took a deep look at Li Tianlan and said indifferently, You'll know after a while. Li Tianlan nodded, narrowed his eyes, and said softly, Then we, or you and Samsara Palace, are we enemies or friends? The man in white was stunned. He seemed to think about it seriously and frowned slightly. Who can say for sure? Anyway, there's no conflict at the moment. The man in white looked at the position behind Li Tianlan and suddenly said, The man who wanted to kill you just now is codenamed Heavenly Calamity, a super killer ranked 5th on the killer list. His strength is not great, but he's really good with guns. His 2 famous guns, Whisper and Grim Smile, are powerful enough to kill all the experts in the Thundershocking realm. Boy, with the strength you just showed, it's still possible to kill Heavenly Calamity in close combat, but if you keep a distance. He shook his head and cursed in a low voice, Damn it, I gave him the barrel of Grim Smile. Li Tianlan's heart skipped a beat, but he didn't show it. The man in white waited for a few more minutes. Seeing that Li Tianlan's face had recovered a little color, he said directly, I'll go after him and talk about the old days. As for this, I'll take it with me. He raised the head in his hand. His figure faded in front of Li Tianlan and then disappeared. Bang! 2 bullets fell next to Li Tianlan. Li Tianlan picked them up and looked at them. One of them was the bullet he had just shot with the sky attack, and the other should be the bullet that almost killed him just now. However, the bullets that could kill most experts at the peak of the Thundershocking realm were all caught by the man in white, and they had been squeezed out of shape by him. The corner of Li Tianlan's mouth twitched. He put away the bullets and said nothing. You can call me Daybreak. In the darkness, the voice of the man in white came faintly from a distance. Don't speak ill of me in front of that crazy woman. Daybreak? This was a code name he had never heard of. But thinking that he might not be weaker than Tribulation in strength, and that he would not be a nobody in the dark world, he had never heard of this kind of super expert who was a half step to the invincible realm or even a little step closer. It could only be said that he was ignorant. Li Tianlan laughed at himself. Before his smile faded, his eyes had narrowed slightly. In the distance, a figure passed through the forest at a very fast speed and rushed directly in Li Tianlan's direction. Jiang Shangyu. A trace of indifference flashed in Li Tianlan's eyes, and his expression was calm. What? Are you in trouble? Jiang Shangyu quickly rushed to Li Tianlan and observed his expression. I just heard a gunshot. Was it aimed at you? Are you all right? I'm fine. It's just a minor injury. Li Tianlan said flatly. A minor injury? Jiang Shangyu's eyes narrowed subconsciously. Li Tianlan, who had recovered some of his combat power, was still very weak, but there was nothing strange on his face. He wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth, pointed to the ruins not far away, and said calmly, Nani Xiao is dead. Jiang Shangyu's eyes, which had been flickering, suddenly froze, and his body shook violently. Nani Xiao? Dead? You killed him? In an instant, there was only a storm in Jiang Shangyu's heart. Li Tianlan could actually kill an expert who was infinitely close to the half-step invincible realm? How could this be possible? Jiang Shangyu's heart was suddenly in a mess. Unable to care about anything else, he subconsciously turned to look at Nani Xiu's body. His eyes were forbearing, with unconcealable bitterness and unwillingness. He's dead. Behind him, Li Tianlan's calm voice sounded, with an indescribable indifference. I think you should go down and see him. Jiang Shangyu's chaotic heart suddenly became extremely clear. His body tightened, and he suddenly turned around at the fastest speed in his life, about to attack with all his strength. In his sight, the silver sky attack in Li Tianlan's hand had been stretched out. The deep muzzle was directly against Jiang Shangyu's chest. Jiang Shangyu's heart suddenly sank, and he was just about to say something. Li Tianlan already smiled, held the gun with both hands, and pulled the trigger without any hesitation. Martyr, take care. Bang! In the gunshot that shook the whole mountain forest, a large vortex appeared in front of Li Tianlan. It was just a shot, but Jiang Shangyu's body seemed to be hit by a missile, and his whole body was directly blown out nearly 100 meters away. Chapter 172. None of my enemies survived. Li Tianlan appreciated this famous saying of Dongqing Wudi, the god of massacre in Zhongzhou State. This was Marshal Dongqing Wudi's declaration to the whole dark world, but for Li Tianlan, it was also the most basic principle in his life. The dark world was the most naked and simple world. Right and wrong, good and evil, right and wrong, were all mixed into the purest blood and black. There was no right or wrong here, only doing or not doing. Enemies deserved to die. This was the simplest truth. Only by killing the enemy could one live. Even an idiot could understand it. Li Tianlan didn't want to judge whether Jiang Shangyu was a good person or a bad person. Simple judgment was actually the most childish behavior in the dark world. Fighting, killing, involving, cooperation, compromise, everything was for the interests and desires that constantly fluctuated in the general trend. How could it be good or bad? Jiang Shangyu had helped Li Tianlan. It had to be admitted that in nearly a week, Jiang Shangyu's professional lurking skills had also reduced a lot of trouble for Li Tianlan. The cooperative hunting between the two could also be said to be a pleasant experience. Even if they got along seriously, Jiang Shangyu could even be regarded as a good person. But he was an enemy. Enemy. That word was enough. From the standpoint of his own survival, if Jiang Shangyu wanted to kill him, then he had to die. He didn't care about the means, the past, or the grudges, as long as he died. This was the dark world. Brutal, pure, and dark. The moment the muzzle of the sky attack was pressed against Jiang Shangyu's chest, there was only calmness in Li Tianlan's eyes. He pulled the trigger. The moment the bullet was fired, the vortex formed in the air swirled wildly. He saw a large amount of blood mist burst out of Jiang Shangyu's body, and his body was blasted into the forest 100 meters away. Li Tianlan just pursed his lips, and his face was pale and indifferent. The vortex ahead surged. A very dazzling silver light flashed in front of Li Tianlan, and then went straight down. It was like a drop of strange liquid. In that instant, it emitted a bright light and then became incomparably dim. However, this drop of liquid fell from above and was not torn apart by the air vortex in front of it. Instead, it directly passed through the extremely distorted air flow and fell straight to the ground. Li Tianlan, who had once again exhausted all his strength, subconsciously reached out and caught the drop of silver liquid in his hand. His tense joints relaxed completely this time, making a crackling sound. He gasped and sat directly on the ground. The air vortex caused by sky strike gradually slowed down. Li Tianlan took a deep breath and looked at the drop of liquid in his hand, frowning slightly. To be precise, it was not a water droplet, but a semi-solidified liquid. It had a terrifyingly high temperature, and when it landed on his hand, it was like magma. The liquid slid slightly in Li Tianlan's hand. Although it was liquid, its structure was not loose at all, which showed its great density. To put it bluntly, this little drop was like a special alloy after melting, or some other substance. Alloy? Li Tianlan's face changed, and he suddenly looked up at the forest ahead. His body instinctively stood up and made a sprinting movement. But just after 2 steps, he swayed and fell to the ground again. In the forest about 100 meters ahead, the night rain mixed with grass and leaves shot into the air at the same time. Large swaths of turf and soil rose up, blocking the view. Vaguely, a figure quickly jumped up in the grass and leaves, rushing into the depths of the forest without looking back. A cold voice with a hint of laughter spread through the forest. It seemed a little weak, but it was cold enough to make people tremble. "Senior Brotherly, we'll meet again. Jiang Shangyu." Li Tianlan tightly grasped the drop of silver liquid in his hand. His expression was calm, but his deep eyes became more and more indifferent. He took a deep breath and felt his current state. He clenched his fists, but he did not chase after him. He was very clear about the power of Sky Strike. This horrible killing weapon developed by the Dongqing clan was enough to threaten most experts of the Thunder-Shocking Realm or even the peak of the Thunder-Shocking Realm at close range. This so-called close distance was roughly around 1,500 meters. Just now, the Sky Strike had been completely pressed against Jiang Shangyu's chest. This was a zero-distance shot. But under such circumstances, Jiang Shangyu did not die. How could he not die? Li Tianlan lowered his head slightly and looked at the silver liquid in his hand. In less than a minute, the semi-solid liquid gradually solidified again. In his sight, the liquid, which was like a water droplet, vibrated slightly and finally became a solid metal ball the size of a soybean. Raindrops kept falling on Li Tianlan's hand. At this moment, he did not know whether it was an illusion or something else, but he always felt that the dim metal ball in his hand seemed to be slightly brighter. What the hell is this? Li Tianlan frowned. There was no doubt that this belonged to Jiang Shangyu. There seemed to be a piece of alloy hidden in his chest. When the sky attack was pressed against Jiang Shangyu's chest, Li Tianlan noticed it, but he didn't pay much attention to it. With the power of the sky attack, there was basically no alloy that could not be destroyed. But it was obvious that the power of Sky Strike was almost completely offset by that piece of alloy. Most of Jiang Shangyu's injuries came from the fierce impact of Sky Strike. And this drop of silver liquid should be a drop that was separated from the piece of alloy in Jiang Shangyu's chest. Of course, it was just a drop that was not completely destroyed. Li Tianlan squeezed the small metal ball in his hand, and his face became a little gloomy. Boom! 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 A series of explosions suddenly rang out in the distance. The roar came from afar, as if there were artillery firing aimlessly. The whole forest was trembling slightly, and the leaves that had lost all their moisture after the battle fluttered and fell. Li Tianlan was stunned and looked back subconsciously. In the distance, at the spot where hundreds of East Island elites were ambushing, an unexpected fierce battle seemed to have broken out. The sound of artillery roared, and the fire soared into the sky. Even though he was very far away, Li Tianlan could vaguely feel the smoke and hot air waves rising in the distance. Li Tianlan suddenly remembered what the man named Daybreak had just said. I was going to kill all the elites of East Island here. Isn't it exciting to think of slaughtering people? But there are already 3 guys who are not weak fighting over there. I came here in advance and happened to see this wonderful battle. Your sword move is good, and that shot is not weak either. But you can't kill Nani Xiu, so I can't be regarded as taking your military exploits. Well, besides, I saved your life. 3 guys who were not weak. Not weak. This didn't sound like a compliment, but such an evaluation came from the mouth of Daybreak, a superior a half-step to the invincible realm. They were at least 3 superiors at the peak of the Thunder-Shocking Realm. With the death of Nani Xiu, this defense spot was obviously going to be wiped out under the surprise attack of 3 superiors at the peak of the Thunder-Shocking Realm. Li Tianlan struggled to stand up, took the sky attack, hesitated, and finally decided to leave. He wasn't sure who was attacking the East Island elites at this defense spot, but in his current state, he wasn't even qualified to go up and watch. It was the best choice to leave here first. But this time, he was alone again. That kind of quiet lurking life seemed to be over. Without Jiang Shangyu, how he, who was seriously injured, could hunt the enemies at other defense spots alone was also a problem that needed careful consideration. Li Tianlan took a deep breath, turned around, and moved forward. Wait a minute. A footstep suddenly sounded from the forest. At first, it was in English, but he soon realized something and repeated it in somewhat stiff Chinese. Li Tianlan turned around abruptly and subconsciously held the sky attack, which actually had no bullets, in his hand. 100 meters away, a sharp blue electric arc spread rapidly in the forest. A figure moved forward as if stepping on the electric light, as fast as the wind and lightning. Any trees in front of him were smashed into powder in the spread of the electric arc. Almost in the blink of an eye, the figure had appeared in front of Li Tianlan in the electric light. Li Tianlan simply gave up the idea of leaving. There was a big difference between superiors at the peak of the thunder-shocking realm. The so-called peak was actually just a realm. After breaking through the stabilization phase of the thunder-shocking realm, it was the peak phase. But there was also a huge difference in combat effectiveness between those who had just entered the peak phase and those who were about to break through. Judging from the momentum, the strength of the person in front of him would at least not be lower than that of Nani Xiu. Even if he was not a half-step to the invincible realm, he was not far from it. Such a person, in Li Tianlan's current state, could not run away. He stood quietly where he was, calmly looking at the figure that appeared in front of him in an instant. This was an extremely handsome Western white man, about 30 years old. He was tall and burly, handsome, and had blonde hair. He wore a white suit, which had been stained with a lot of blood. His smile was gentle, but his body still carried the fierce killing intent that had not dissipated. He looked elegant and dangerous. He looked at Li Tianlan's face seriously. After the battle, Li Tianlan's face was dirty, but it did not completely cover his appearance. The white man breathed a sigh of relief and said with a smile, "Is it Li Tianlan? Young Master Li? Young Master Li?" Li Tianlan had heard of this name, but he rarely heard it. He narrowed his eyes slightly, but his hand did not loosen his grip on the gun. "Let me introduce myself. I'm Duke. Madame Qin Weibai's most loyal servant." Duke looked at Li Tianlan with a smile on his face and sighed with emotion. "I finally found you. My God, you don't know how we got through these days. If you had an accident in East Island, the boss would have been furious. I'm afraid that none of us servants would have survived." Duke. Among the 12 super masters of Samsara, Duke ranked second only to Saint, military counselor, and general. Li Tianlan's eyes moved. He had never seen this super master of Samsara before, so he did not dare to be careless. He just said calmly, "Why should I believe your identity? Isn't my loyalty enough?" Duke looked at Li Tianlan in surprise and said in a serious tone. The corner of Li Tianlan's mouth twitched. At this moment, he could almost clearly hear the sound of something falling to the ground. That was the moral integrity of a supermaster. It fell to the ground and broke into pieces. "Tianlan, he is indeed Duke. After you lost contact, we acted together. 10 hours ago, we got in touch with Bai Yuming again and knew what you were going to do tonight. So, we came here as soon as possible. Are you okay?" A faint tired voice sounded, steady and dignified. A tall and plump blonde woman walked out of the darkness and appeared in front of Li Tianlan. "Horsewoman." Li Tianlan finally breathed a sigh of relief, put down the sky attack in his hand, and shook his head. "I'm okay. It's not a big problem." Horsewoman nodded and smiled. When she was about to say something, Duke suddenly said, "Young Master Li, here." He pointed at the empty and desolate battlefield nearby and said with a solemn expression, "Is this the place where you fought?" "Yes, I met Nani Xiu and Heavenly Calamity." Li Tianlan nodded. "Heavenly Calamity? Duke's and Horsewoman's faces changed at the same time, and they subconsciously raised their voices. Li Tianlan's eyes narrowed slightly, and he suddenly had a better understanding of Heavenly Calamity, who was known as the Spear King. He mentioned Nani Xiao and Heavenly Calamity at the same time, but it was clear that Duke and Horsewoman's attention had been attracted by Heavenly Calamity. It's Heavenly Calamity. Li Tianlan nodded. But he ran away, and Nani Xiao died. As he spoke, he suddenly thought of something. He narrowed his eyes and asked, by the way, do you know the code name Daybreak? Daybreak? Duke was stunned and subconsciously looked at Horsewoman. Then he nodded. I've only heard of this person recently. He seems to be a loyal confidant of a highness. I'm afraid he's no weaker than Saint. His strength seems to have surpassed the half-step invincible realm, and he's only one step away from the real invincible realm. This is a very mysterious force. Horsewoman said, Samsara seems to be planning to cooperate with them recently. Saint is in charge of this matter. Mysterious, in Li Tianlan's impression, Samsara Palace seemed to be the most mysterious force in the dark world. And the force behind Daybreak, was it the kind of force that was so mysterious that it didn't even have a name? Saint. Well, Saint, Li Tianlan narrowed his eyes. He knew that Saint, the first super master of Samsara, was in East Island. If there was no accident, Saint should be with Shitian Mingzi and Dubian Xianyuan now, and he had already got in touch with Shitian Financial Group. Then Shitian Financial Group, Li Tianlan asked subconsciously. It's a bargaining chip. Duke said everything he knew. Perhaps only the core supermasters like them knew what the identity of Qin Weibai's man meant. Shitian Financial Group is the bargaining chip for the transaction between Samsara and the force behind Daybreak. Li Tianlan whistled subconsciously and said with a smile, a large financial group as a bargaining chip. What a big deal. The sound of gunfire still sounded in the distance, but it was getting weaker and weaker. Li Tianlan glanced in that direction and raised his eyebrows slightly. Who's there? It's Flaming Fire. The three of us acted together. Looking at Paladin who wanted to say something, Paladin glared at him without batting an eyelid. Li Tianlan nodded and said, let's go and have a look. Horsewoman suddenly looked around and said in a strange tone, Tianlan, I heard that Zhang Shangyu is with you. Where is he? He escaped. Li Tianlan was silent for 2 seconds and sighed. I shot him. I thought I could kill him, but there was an accident. He reached out and handed the bean-sized metal ball in his hand to Horsewoman. Do you know what this is? Horsewoman subconsciously took it. Looking at the metal that had completely solidified into a round ball, she frowned slightly. Duke suddenly made a sound of surprise. He took the metal ball and looked at it carefully. Li Tianlan looked at Duke calmly. But Duke's face gradually became dignified. He quickly glanced at Li Tianlan, then lowered his head and stretched out a finger. A faint but bright electric arc appeared in his hand. The arc became brighter and brighter, gradually turning into a dazzling blue. Duke stretched out his finger and slowly pressed the arc on the metal ball in his palm. The metal ball surged slightly and seemed to be a little loose under the impact of the arc. But then it returned to its original state again, but the light was a little dimmer. Duke's pupils shrank slightly. He glanced at Li Tianlan with a complicated look in his eyes. This is a kind of metal. The Duke hesitated for a moment and said something insincerely. Make it clear. Li Tianlan narrowed his eyes and said calmly. There was no curiosity or command in his voice, but there was an irresistible force in it. Duke smiled bitterly and looked at Li Tianlan. He hesitated and said, I'm not sure what it is. I'm just guessing that it should be a metal that has lost part of its activity. But if there is no accident, the activity of this metal will slowly recover after a while. He looked at Li Tianlan cautiously. Li Tianlan remained calm. Horsewoman's face changed. A metal that could withstand the attack of a top expert of the thunder-shocking realm without losing part of its activity, and its activity could slowly recover. There seemed to be only one kind of metal like this in the whole dark world. Go on. Li Tianlan looked at the silver in Duke's hand without changing his expression. Duke looked at Horsewoman and braced himself to say, Young Master Li, do you know the 12 murderous weapons in the dark world? Li Tianlan looked at Duke strangely and nodded without saying anything. Actually, Duke took a deep breath and said softly, 20 years ago, there were 13 murderous weapons in the dark world, but later one was broken. Among the 13 murderous weapons, only 2 have silver bodies. One belongs to the Jiang family of South America and is called the Legend of Qin. And the other is called the Infinite Sky. It used to belong to Zhuanyuantai of Kunlun, to the Li family. Li Tianlan's face suddenly changed. Duke looked at the metal ball in his hand and continued, if I'm not mistaken, this little thing should be one of the fragments of the Infinite Sky. Speaking of updates, the recent updates are really F***ed up. Just now in the reader group, a brother said that he didn't want to see the updates, but wanted to see the reason why he stopped updating. But in fact, I can't even find a reason to stop updating, I'm just not in a good state. I have ideas and know how to write, but I just feel unsatisfied when I write. In fact, I feel that I can update twice or even 3 times every day. I think so when I stop updating, but when I write, it's F***ing, a pain in the ass. Chapter 173. The rain fell between heaven and earth in the night and slowed down. The rainy days in Changdao that had lasted for many days seemed to be about to pass. The wind gradually became gentle and blew melodiously into the distance. As far as the eye could see, the fire gradually went out, and the sound of gunfire slowly disappeared. The quiet mountain forest was covered with the veil of night, extraordinarily quiet and serene. Li Tianlan stood quietly on the uneven ground after the fierce battle. He lowered his head and looked at the silver metal ball in his hand. The murderous weapon that once belonged to the Li family. The murderous weapon that was broken in the last battle of his father. In that battle, it was not only the infinite sky that had been shattered. The glory and splendor of the Li family for hundreds of years seemed to have been shattered along with this murderous weapon, turned into dust, particles, and turned into nothingness. Li Tianlan never knew that his family also had a murderous weapon that could dominate the dark world. But in some vague memories, it seemed that when he was very young, when the people in the camp at the border were still prosperous, his grandfather seemed to have sent many people to the border to look for something. Was this it? Looking at the bean-sized metal ball in his hand, Li Tianlan's eyes turned as deep as the deepest night sky. You can understand it as for a woman. My most beloved woman. Do you know what Kunlun City is? Do you know what Phoenix Pavilion is? Why does it have nothing to do with a mortal enemy? Senior Brother Li, do you know how your father died back then? Among the 13 murderous weapons, only 2 have silver bodies. One belongs to the Jiang family of South America and is called the Legend of Qin. And the other is called the Infinite Sky. It used to belong to Zhuanyuantai of Kunlun, to the Li family. In the quiet mountain forest, some seemingly important or unimportant conversations immediately came into Li Tianlan's mind. Kunlun City, Phoenix Pavilion, the Li family, the Infinite Sky, some things seemed to be vaguely related to each other, but some crucial things were missing from each other. No matter how he thought about it, something was wrong. What did Zhang Shangyu know? And how did the fragment of the Infinite Sky fall into Zhang Shangyu's hands? Li Tianlan was silent, carefully recalling the scene when the muzzle of the sky attack was pressed against Zhang Shangyu's chest. He felt that the fragment was at least the size of a palm. If they were all fragments of the Infinite Sky, how could Zhang Shangyu get so many? Zhang Shangyu. Zhang Shangyu. Li Tianlan clenched the silver metal ball in his hand and kept repeating the name. The bright light kept flashing in his pupils, which added a bit of enchanting charm to him. Young Master Li, should I go after them? He shouldn't have gone far. Duke looked at Li Tianlan and asked cautiously. Duke, who met Li Tianlan for the first time, didn't like or dislike him, but he knew very well what it meant when his boss asked him to come to East Island. The 12 super masters of samsara were the real core figures of Samsara Palace, but when the will of the master of Samsara Palace was silent, Qin Weibai's will was the highest instruction of the whole Samsara Palace. Duke naturally knew how to treat Li Tianlan. Li Tianlan's heart skipped a beat. After thinking about it, he shook his head and smiled. Forget it. He glanced at Duke and said calmly, "From now on, just call me by my name like horsewoman." "I'll call you Duke." Duke nodded, but there seemed to be some confusion in his eyes. He didn't know why Li Tianlan didn't let him catch up. The intelligence system of Samsara Palace had always been a mystery to the outside world. What people had seen had always been the kind of almost all-pervasive and yet meticulous intelligence system that never existed. Of course, Samsara Palace knew Zhongzhou State very well. In terms of the younger generation, although Jiang Shangyu ranked second among the top 10 young experts, behind Wang Xingxiao and Gu Hanzhan, Samsara Palace had a very high evaluation of Jiang Shangyu, even the highest. He was no weaker than Wang Xingxiao and Gu Hanzhan at all. How far could such a person escape when he was seriously injured? If he caught up with him now, Duke had at least 50% confidence to kill Jiang Shangyu. This was equivalent to getting rid of a future enemy for Li Tianlan. Why not catch up with such a good opportunity? Your identities. Li Tianlan looked at Duke and shook his head. Not appropriate. Duke was stunned. He took a deep look at Li Tianlan and said nothing. Li Tianlan also wanted to kill Jiang Shangyu. Duke was an expert who was infinitely close to the half-step invincible realm. If he did it himself, the chance of success was quite high. But there was no impenetrable wall in the world. Although Samsara Palace had been cooperating with Zhongzhou State in recent years, partners and their own people were two different concepts. If Jiang Shangyu died in his hands, it could be regarded as dying in the battle for the chosen one in Zhongzhou State. But if he died in the hands of Duke, the super master of Samsara, then things would become sensitive. Today, the Jiang family occupied more than just a seat in the decision-making committee. Jiang Shangyu's father, Jiang Shan, could easily set off a big storm, no matter his position in the Prince Group or his relationship with the Special Warfare Group. If Jiang Shangyu died in the hands of Samsara Palace, the best result was that Samsara Palace would be in constant trouble. If it was more serious, the entire Samsara Palace would completely withdraw from Zhongzhou State, and it was even possible that it would be listed as a hostile force. There's nothing inappropriate about it. A cold and sweet voice came from the dark mountain forest. Although there are risks, there are some things that can't be guaranteed. It's definitely worth taking some risks to keep Jiang Shangyu here. Li Tianlan raised his eyebrows slightly and turned his head. The night rain had completely stopped. Flaming Fire's figure walked out of the wet and hazy night. She looked a little tired, but her eyes were amazingly bright. In the future, Jiang Shangyu is likely to be one of your most powerful enemies. It's a pity not to kill such a person. Duke looked at Flaming Fire and then at Li Tianlan, ready to make a move. Li Tianlan habitually narrowed his eyes. After a moment of silence, he shook his head. Forget it. He was silent for a while and finally shook his head. It had been about 10 minutes since Jiang Shangyu escaped. Li Tianlan was not sure whether the communication device on Jiang Shangyu was damaged or not. If it was not damaged, then at least Jiang Shangyu had informed his father Jiang Shan as soon as possible. If he went after him now, whether he succeeded or failed, it would be troublesome. Li Tianlan was not worried that Jiang Shangyu would spread the news that he had shot him. First of all, Jiang Shangyu wanted to kill him first. Second, whether it was the fragment of the infinite sky, the so-called Phoenix Pavilion, or Jiang Shangyu's heavenly king heart, they were all involved in the game of life and death between the two. At most, Jiang Shangyu would tell Jiang Shan. As long as he did not die, then at least the two sides could exchange for a superficial peace. Even if it was temporary, it was much better than the trouble he would face after killing Jiang Shangyu. Time. The most important thing was time. Li Tianlan now needed at least 2 or 3 years to recover to his peak state. The inadaptability of forcibly upgrading to the fire-flaming realm with medicine and the temporary effect of the medicine made Li Tianlan crave to become stronger. If he had 3 or 5 years, he did not even need to reach the invincible realm. As long as he entered the thunder-shocking realm, he would not have so many considerations and scruples, and he would not have to compromise in the face of the general trend. Let's go. Li Tianlan carefully put away the fragment of the infinite sky, which represented the glory of the Li family, and turned to walk forward. Young Master Li, no, Tianlan, I think what Jingxiang said is right. I'm willing to give it a try. It's a good thing to help you kill an enemy directly, isn't it? Duke walked beside Li Tianlan, a step behind him, and said with a chuckle. It had to be said that when this handsome super master of samsara smiled, he gave people a very warm feeling. He had blonde hair and obvious smile lines. When he smiled, his whole handsome face seemed to show a kind of sincere joy, and it was so bright that it seemed to be able to dispel the darkness around him. Li Tianlan turned to look at him and suddenly asked, "Do you know who my biggest enemy is?" Duke's smile froze slightly, and then he instinctively pondered. It should be Wang Xingxiao. Well, he does deserve the title of young heavenly son. He has such strength at such a young age. There is no second one in the dark world like him. With this kind of talent, he deserves the title of heavenly son. Li Tianlan smiled. In the past 200 years, the fastest expert to reach the thunder-shocking realm in Zhongzhou State and even in the dark world was 23 years old. This record came from Zhuanyuantai of Kunlun. It could be said that it was one of Li Tianlan's ancestors. Wang Xingxiao had never celebrated his 24th birthday. Compared with the legendary record, he was only a few months slower. Li Tianlan never denied this terrifying talent. After Wang Xingxiao, in the words of Zhongzhou State, it is probably Gu Hanshan and Jiang Shanyu. They may all become your biggest enemies. But although these people are also very strong, they are not as good as Wang Xingxiao. I'm not talking about strength and talent. It should be the foundation. It seems that people who come from the Wang family of Beihai will be looked up to on any occasion. Duke shook his head and sighed softly. There was some melancholy in his eyes for no reason. Li Tianlan didn't stop smiling. He shook his head and said in a flat tone, "No. No." Duke looked at Li Tianlan with a puzzled face. My biggest enemy is time. And only time. Li Tianlan said blandly, if it's about people, I have no enemies. He looked at the night ahead with a calm and resolute expression. His gentle tone revealed a kind of confidence that could make anyone awe. Not even one. The corner of Duke's mouth twitched. After a long silence, he shrugged and spread his hands, saying with a smile, well, I shouldn't have believed it. But I don't know why, after hearing it from you, I believe it. Jingxiang, horsewoman, do you believe it? A strong killing intent rose behind him out of nowhere. Li Tianlan looked back in shock. Flaming Fire, who was quietly following him, squinted and stared at Duke, who had a playful smile on his face. Horsewoman looked helpless. Li Tianlan, who didn't know the situation, looked at Flaming Fire and asked subconsciously, your name is Jingxiang? I heard from Little Bai that you are from East Island. You. He looked at Duke and felt that something was wrong, but he couldn't tell what was wrong. The 12 super masters of samsara were all code names. Duke could call Flaming Fire's real name intimately. They should have a good relationship, but, Kyoka Kitano. Tianlan, don't you know her? Duke blinked. His smile was still bright and handsome, but there was a trace of wretchedness in it. Looking at Li Tianlan's blank expression, Duke shook his head in disbelief and sighed. My God, you really need to make up for it. There is someone who doesn't know Kyoka Kitano. She is my goddess, the most famous star in East Island today. Tianlan, I will show you Kitano's works later. Her latest work seems to be. Crazy Girl, Wife Investigator. You should see it, really. In Flaming Fire's eyes, which were about to explode, Duke continued to talk excitedly. Flaming Fire's face is 70% similar to Kyoka Kitano's, but her temperament is colder. Well, I have observed her, but it's so beautiful. I face Flaming Fire every night. No, it's Kitano. Tianlan, do you want to touch it? Flaming Fire doesn't dare to refuse. Damn woman, do you want to fight me? The lightning, like extremely condensed thunderbolts, suddenly fell from the sky. Li Tianlan, who was standing next to Duke, was unscathed, but there was a big black hole where Duke had been standing. In the flashing lightning, Duke and Flaming Fire disappeared almost at the same time. The blue arc of light spread fiercely, and the forest dozens of meters away exploded into the sky in an instant. It's starting again. Horsewoman groaned helplessly. She looked at Li Tianlan and said with a wry smile, "Personal advice, Tianlan. You should stay away from that wretched bastard Duke. He seems to be interested in Flaming Fire, and me, our butts. This kind of thing has happened more than once." Duke's words came to Li Tianlan's mind for no reason. "Tianlan, do you want to touch it?" Flaming Fire doesn't dare to refuse, and horsewoman, Li Tianlan's eyes wandered. It was completely instinctive. Horsewoman's dignified and charming face suddenly blushed. She took a small step back subconsciously and stared at him with her beautiful eyes. "What are you looking at?" Li Tianlan coughed and looked away awkwardly, but 4 words were still echoing in his mind. "Don't dare to refuse." This "don't dare" was really exquisite. "Let's go." He took a deep breath, stepped forward, and asked casually, "What's your next plan?" "Let's gather people in Changdao first. Whether it's me, Duke, or Flaming Fire, we all have tasks in Changdao. But our main task is to keep you safe. So when we heard that you were missing, we all put down what we were doing. Now our team should break through to Changdao, and some of them have already entered Changdao. The most important thing now is to gather people." Horsewoman shrugged and said in a lazy tone, "It's not easy." Li Tianlan frowned and said subconsciously. He was sure that some elites had already entered Changdao, but now many people on both sides had completely lost contact. Even Li Beidian and the others were missing. It might be quite difficult to gather these people, but it was something they had to do. "It's okay." Horsewoman said softly, "We've recently established a new cooperation channel in East Island, and now it comes in handy." "A new cooperation channel?" Li Tianlan glanced at Horsewoman, who still looked calm, and a figure came to his mind instinctively. Daybreak. Daybreak, who just appeared and saved his life. Samsara Palace seemed to be ready to cooperate with the force behind Daybreak by using Shitian Financial Group, which intended to seek refuge, as a bargaining chip. Intuitively, Li Tianlan felt that this new cooperation channel had something to do with the force behind Daybreak. A mysterious force whose name he didn't even know? Could it be a big force hidden in East Island? Samsara was cooperating with the hidden dark force in East Island. Did the officials of East Island know about it? East Island and Zhongzhou State and Samsara and East Island. The success or failure of Zhongzhou State's plan probably depended on the result of the Battle of Changdao. A series of things should have gradually come to the surface, but a cloud of fog suddenly appeared in front of Li Tianlan's eyes. It covered the general trend, and it was chaotic. "In fact, I was inclined to kill Jiang Shangyu just now," Horsewoman suddenly said, "but it's a little too late to say this now. We can only wait for the next chance. This time, Jiang Shangyu is seriously injured and may leave East Island. It seems that only Wang Xingxiao and Gu Hanzhan are left as candidates for that position." "Which position?" Li Tianlan looked back at Horsewoman. "You don't know?" The look in Horsewoman's eyes was strange. Li Tianlan frowned and shook his head. He didn't understand why Wang Xingxiao and Gu Hanzhan, the heirs of the 2 super forces, would participate in this Zhongzhou State plan. It was reasonable for them to compete with each other for the country, but he felt it was a little abrupt. After all, even if they were competing, they wouldn't participate in such a big scene where they could die at any time. It was best to let them continue to grow. But now, with the so-called position that Horsewoman said, everything seemed to have a reasonable explanation. To be exact, it's a quarter of the leadership of a troop. This was originally a competition between Wang Xingxiao and Gu Hanshan, and the higher-ups also acquiesced. But Wang Xingxiao also had this idea, but now, Horsewoman shook her head and said, "It's his bad luck to meet you." "Which troop?" Li Tianlan touched his nose, feeling a little baffled. "The National Treasure." Horsewoman looked at Li Tianlan and said faintly, "The super troop of Zhongzhou State, similar to the Kusanagi force, but more advanced." Chapter 174. It was noon, and the sun was high in the sky. In the past week, the drizzle had washed away the dust in the air. Under the sunshine, the air in Chengdao was unspeakably clean and fresh. The bright sunshine shone on the deep yard with mottled shadows of trees. The breeze blew the hair, the leaves and the shadows of the trees swayed. This was a large yard, deep and quiet, almost completely surrounded by all kinds of artificially planted trees and flowers. There was only one cobblestone path in the yard that could allow two people to walk side by side. The path zigzagged to the antique attic in the center of the yard. After spring, when everything came back to life, autumn hadn't arrived yet. The whole yard was lush and full of vitality. The fragrance of flowers. The fragrance of tea was spreading in the wind. In front of the milky white marble table, Li Tianlan quietly looked at the list in his hand and said without looking up, "What does this mean?" "It means exactly what it means." Duke, who was wearing a very coquettish pink suit, sat opposite Li Tianlan with a bright smile. Within the Samsara Palace, the ranking among the super masters was extremely important. Although they were all super masters, the ranking often meant the status of each other. Among the 12 super masters of the Samsara Palace, 4 were in East Island. The first super master, Saint, was in charge of cooperating with a mysterious force and had never met Li Tianlan. Among Duke, Horsewoman, and Flaming Fire, Duke ranked the highest. When something happened, he naturally took the lead. Horsewoman and Flaming Fire had a tacit understanding of this. So now he sat in front of Li Tianlan and gave him a document. "Of course I know." Li Tianlan put the document on the table and pointed at it with his fingers. Then he subconsciously rubbed his forehead and said with a wry smile, "But I don't know what you mean by showing me this document." They were now in a secret club in the southwest of Chengdao, and it could even be said to be the most high-end secret club. East Island had a high population density, but its territory was very small. Therefore, in the whole East Island, some racecourses, golf courses, clubs, and even villa areas that covered a large area were strictly approved. This kind of land-saving practice also promoted the unity and cohesion of the upper circle of East Island to some extent, which could be considered as killing 2 birds with 1 stone. But this kind of strict approval procedure was an exception in Chengdao. This was the first city in the world to be bombed by nuclear weapons. It had been deserted for a long time. Many large areas of vacant land in Chengdao were bought a long time ago. The club Li Tianlan was in now was one of them, and it belonged to a foreign company. It seemed to be backed by a famous European consortium and had a deep foundation in Chengdao. This was also the place where the 3 super masters of Samsara hid with Li Tianlan. From the beginning to the end, the clubhouse had been specially assigned to receive them, and they also sent people to take care of their food and daily life in secret. All the waiters were European, and Li Tianlan and the others were not allowed to meet any East Island people in the clubhouse. According to the Duke, this place was absolutely safe. And Li Tianlan finally had the most comfortable sleep since he arrived in East Island. He slept for nearly 8 hours without worrying about Jiang Shangyu's plot or Mai Shiranui's pursuit. Li Tianlan even dreamed of Qin Weibai and Wang Yuetong. When the charming dream passed and the sun rose high in the sky, Li Tianlan, who had a comfortable sleep, saw Duke again and the information he handed over. This was an extremely complicated set of information, or rather, a list of names. It was a list that was so long that it made him dizzy. Duke said, "It's urgent." So Li Tianlan sat in front of the stone table and spent nearly 3 hours reading the list. He missed lunch and drank 4 or 5 cups of tea. Then he braced himself to finish reading the list. The list involved polar light, and many people didn't even have exact names. They only said that they belonged to a certain organization and a few people. Li Tianlan had seen many names on the list. Of course, most of them he had never seen before. Yi Fengcheng, Gu Yunxia, Thunder God, Gu Yulan, Fan Haoyu, Du Hanin. Li Tianlan was familiar with these. There were also some messy organizations like the 6 members of the Flying Bird Special Warfare Group, the 13 members of the Black Hole Intelligence Department, and the 7 members of the 5th Bureau affiliated to Kunlun City. Li Tianlan had never heard of them. Li Tianlan braced himself to finish reading the list. He felt dizzy and numbly looked at the top of the list. There were only 4 words on the top. Snowdance Corps. Li Tianlan naturally knew about the Snowdance Corps. It was a corps set up for the plot of Zhongzhou State this time. In this respect, Li Tianlan was now a member of the Snowdance Corps. But this list, to some extent, you are now in control of the life and death of everyone on the list. Duke smiled and took a sip of tea. His tone was soft and soothing, and there seemed to be a strange brilliance in his eyes. Li Tianlan raised his eyebrows in surprise. Before he could speak, Duke had taken the initiative to explain. There are about 2,000 people in the Snowdance Corps who entered East Island this time. And East Island reacted very fast this time, faster than everyone's expectation. So? Duke shrugged with a smile on his face. They are all scattered now. Both Samsara and Zhongzhou State expected such a situation at the beginning, but they didn't expect that East Island's attack would be so fierce. Now East Island is in chaos, but the elites of Zhongzhou State are even more chaotic. Countless experts of East Island are chasing after the scattered teams. Some intelligence agencies of Zhongzhou State are almost uprooted. Now everyone is trying to break through the encirclement of Changdao. If there is no accident, among these 2,000 people, there will be no more than 200 elites of Zhongzhou State who can escape the chase and break through the defense nodes on the periphery of Changdao. Now the members of the Snowdance Corps in East Island, to be precise, are in a state of disunity. Li Tianlan stared at Duke seriously and attentively, waiting for him to continue. There are about 1,200 people on this list. Duke pointed to the list in Li Tianlan's hand and said calmly, and they are the 1,200 people whose whereabouts are under our control. Li Tianlan's pupils shrank suddenly, but he didn't ask anything. Instead, he lowered his head subconsciously and glanced at the list again quickly. His face became a little gloomy, and he slightly clenched his fists. His face, which had always been calm and almost indifferent, finally showed a trace of anxiety that he couldn't hide. On this list of people whose whereabouts were under Samsara's control, there were still no names of Li Beidian, Ning Qiancheng, Yu Qinyan, and Dongqing Rushi. Li Tianlan felt a little agitated. He took out a cigarette and lit it. He took a deep breath and managed to suppress his thoughts. Then he said calmly, "Go on." Duke nodded and said, "Now there is a very interesting change in the situation. And obviously, Changdao has been regarded by the officials of East Island as the battlefield of the final battle." Li Tianlan nodded. Of course, he knew that East Island wouldn't tolerate the dark invasion of Zhongzhou State. The final battle was imperative. But this was East Island, and East Island had the final say on where the final battle would be held. Nearly 2,000 elites from different cities in East Island chased them all the way to Changdao. It sounded extremely difficult, but it was the special warfare system of East Island and the support from all sides that did it. To put it bluntly, everyone from Zhongzhou State who sneaked into East Island was basically under the control of East Island. The reason why they didn't kill them all was that East Island didn't plan to pay too much. This was the home field of East Island, but at the same time, a large number of their elites were trapped in Zhongzhou State. On the national level, these were the bargaining chips of both sides. And even if East Island was really determined to kill all the elites of Zhongzhou State, it wasn't their style to fight separately. The scattered elites of Zhongzhou State were looking for a group. Wasn't East Island the same? If the scattered forces of Zhongzhou State were 1, then the scattered forces of East Island would be 100. Now they couldn't wait to kill them all. If some masters of Zhongzhou State were to fight desperately, East Island would suffer heavy losses. If Zhongzhou State killed the elites trapped in Zhongzhou State in a rage, the special warfare system of East Island wouldn't be able to recover in at least a few decades. It would drag on slowly. They would hunt them down, but they wouldn't risk their lives. They would let a large number of elites of Zhongzhou State bleed slowly, but they wouldn't be desperate and fight desperately. When their strength was less and less and they arrived in Changdao exhausted, East Island would gather its forces and try its best to deal with the last group of elites of Zhongzhou State. At that time, it would be up to East Island to decide whether to kill them all or capture them alive to trade with Zhongzhou State. East Island chose Changdao as the final battlefield, and the elites of Zhongzhou State had no choice. Even the other superpowers in the Dark World who might enter East Island to participate in this feast had no choice. After all, this was the home field of East Island. They had to play wherever East Island said. This wasn't a rule, but the Battle of Changdao was a tacit understanding of the Dark World. Everything that happened in Changdao could be regarded as a conflict in the Dark World. If they left Changdao and wanted to play somewhere else, East Island wouldn't let a large number of superiors wreak havoc in its territory. Then everything would turn into a war, and East Island would be forced to take out its army and weapons of mass destruction at the same time. By then, no one would be able to afford to play. It was the easiest for all parties to control the general trend within the scope of the conflict in the Dark World and get the desired benefits. I know. Li Tianlan nodded. The eyes of the Dark World are all focused on Changdao now, right? The Battle of Changdao? Yes. Duke nodded. The Battle of Changdao, and now it has entered the final stage. He paused, suddenly smiled, and asked, so, in the final stage, which high-level member of the Snowdance Corps has arrived in Changdao? Li Tianlan froze. The high-level member of the Snowdance Corps in Changdao? Several names flashed through his mind in an instant. Tribulation was still in Dongdu. Bai Yuming and Yi Fengqing were together, and now they were in Juban. Gu Yunxia had entered Wakayama. Thunder God appeared in Gangshan. The Enchantress was looking for Wang Xingxiao. In this way, none of the thunder-shocking realm experts belonging to Zhongzhou State had arrived in Changdao at this time. What did this mean? In terms of cooperation, there are still high-level members with decision-making power. Duke chuckled and said, the Snowdance Corps was established in a hurry, and the internal organization is still messy. In addition, we cooperate with Samsara, so the internal duties are not clearly divided for the time being. We are partners of Zhongzhou State, so I, Horsewoman, and Flaming Fire all have decision-making power. So, Li Tianlan's heart pounded. So, the situation has changed now. You see, now Zhongzhou State has obviously lost control of all the elites, and their intelligence channels have been uprooted. Even the high-level members of Zhongzhou State don't know where a large number of their elites are. But Zhongzhou State doesn't know, but Samsara does. The two sides conspire against East Island, which is cooperation. But if they use their own channels to help Zhongzhou State pick up their elites at the risk of exposure, this is not cooperation. Duke spread out his hands and laughed very happily. So, Li Tianlan took a hard drag on the cigarette, put it out, and said calmly, do you decide to stand by and do nothing about the people on the list? We haven't decided yet. Duke looked at Li Tianlan with a strange look in his eyes. He stared at Li Tianlan for a long time, then shook his head slightly and said with a smile, we are waiting for your decision now. You are an ordinary member of the Snowdance Corps, but in Samsara, here, you have the highest decision-making power. He looked at Li Tianlan with a complicated look in his eyes and chuckled. Tianlan, although your face is not too white, I have to say that you are the most enviable gigolo now. I'm not belittling you, I'm envious. Pure envious. Li Tianlan instantly understood what Duke meant when he said that he controlled the life and death of all the people on the list. Whether to save or not to save the more than 1,000 people on the list was now decided by him. Li Tianlan felt a little ridiculous. He looked at the list in his hand, which was not detailed but extremely rare, and said sincerely, "The intelligence system of samsara really makes people speechless. This is not our channel." Duke was stunned and said frankly, "Our power in East Island is relatively weak, otherwise we would not have dragged Zhongzhou State to East Island. These intelligence channels belong to our allies. It's the mysterious force behind Daybreak." Li Tianlan couldn't help asking, "What kind of force is that? You don't even know its name, do you?" God knows what their name is. Maybe they haven't thought about it yet. Duke said indifferently, "But this list is not fake. The cooperation between the two sides is very sincere this time. If you want to save people, it's our allies who will pick up the elites of Zhongzhou State. At worst, we can bring back at least 2/3 of the 1,200 people intact." A force that hadn't even thought about its name? Was it newly established? Or, Li Tianlan felt a headache and even more ridiculous. He shook his head randomly and said subconsciously, "Of course, don't rush to speak." Duke stood up with a smile and patted Li Tianlan on the shoulder. "You should think about it. Or, you should talk to Zhongzhou State, shouldn't you?" Talk? Li Tianlan's heart suddenly shook. He suddenly stood up and looked at Duke. The Duke had a deep smile on his face. A light breeze blew through his hair, and his long, golden hair fluttered like the waves of the sea. Li Tianlan didn't want to ask what to talk about. The fate of thousands or even more elites of Zhongzhou State was now in his hands. What to talk to Zhongzhou State about? Of course, to talk about conditions. Li Tianlan could almost clearly see a huge opportunity in front of him. If he made good use of this negotiation, it might be the biggest cornerstone of his rise. Of course, the premise was that he couldn't arouse the disgust of the big shots of Zhongzhou State. To put it simply, he couldn't be too greedy. What did he ask Zhongzhou State for? What could he get? And even if he couldn't get anything, those people he was about to save would undoubtedly owe him a great favor. This was almost a human network map drawn by the general trend. It was at his fingertips. Priceless treasure. But, is this really appropriate? Li Tianlan looked at Duke. If Her Highness Palace Master talks to Zhongzhou State in person, maybe she can get a lot of things that are beneficial to samsara. In other words, these more than 1,000 people are your bargaining chips. Why give them to me? What did Palace Master say? Palace Master is silent. The Duke shrugged again. Li Tianlan smiled bitterly. In samsara, when the master of Samsara Palace was silent, Qin Weibai's will was supreme. Boss said to help you at all costs. This is a good opportunity, isn't it? Duke said calmly, Palace Master used the 24 moves of sword, the unique skill of your Li family, in the battle with Gu Xingyun. Your identity can't be kept secret for long. At this time, having so many elites owe you a favor may become one of your powerful bargaining chips to save your life. He reached into his arms and took out a slightly smaller but extremely detailed document. After talking to Zhongzhou State, you should talk to the Wang family of Beihai. Li Tianlan's mouth twitched, and he subconsciously took the document. Let's go, it's time to eat. Duke glanced at Li Tianlan with a smile. I thought you would refuse this deal, and I was even ready to persuade you. Aren't all gentlemen like this? Li Tianlan twitched the corner of his mouth and said lightly, I'm not a gentleman. But you, or you supermasters, don't you have any objection to Little Bai's approach? Why should I have any objection? Duke said lightly, I listened to Palace Master, and Palace Master asked me to listen to my boss. That's it. Since I joined Samsara 5 years ago, it has been like this. Li Tianlan shook his head with a bitter smile. Suddenly, he froze and said subconsciously, You said you joined Samsara 5 years ago? Yes. Chapter 175. In less than a month, Zhuang Huayang was obviously much older and haggard. On the screen, the old principal still looked as refined and gentle as a middle-aged scholar, but the fatigue in his eyes could not be hidden. His skin, which used to be rather tight, was gradually relaxing, and wrinkles had increased. After not seeing him for a short period of time, Zhuang Huayang seemed to have aged by 10 years. Although he looked haggard, it could be seen that the old headmaster was in a good mood. At least his smile wasn't fake. As soon as he saw Li Tianlan through the screen, he chuckled and said, "Boy, is everything going well in Changdao?" "Not bad." Li Tianlan responded casually, but he was thinking about the list he just saw in his mind. The negotiation with Zhongzhou State couldn't be delayed. The sooner, the better. Li Tianlan knew what to do without Duke's reminder. From the time Li Tianlan sorted out the information to the time he finished reading, the latest was 16 hours ago, and the shortest was 6 hours. It wasn't a long time. But now almost all the elites of Zhongzhou State were facing the pursuit of the special warfare system of East Island. It was a veritable speed of life and death. A few hours was enough for too many variables to happen. And even if this was not mentioned, judging from the overall trend, there wouldn't be much time left for Li Tianlan. Nearly 2,000 elites of Zhongzhou State were breaking out of the encirclement of Changdao from all over East Island. So far, although everyone was still running away from the pursuit, they inevitably got close to Changdao. Even in the worst case, they had at most one more week, and this pursuit would end. The Zhongzhou State elites who were being chased would either enter Changdao and wait for the final battle, or die on the road. Li Tianlan couldn't afford to delay at all. So he didn't even have lunch and went straight to Zhuang Huayang with the list. "Something on your mind?" Zhuang Huayang looked at Li Tianlan and raised his eyebrows slightly. Seeing that Li Tianlan still didn't want to speak, he sighed slightly and said, "You're stressed, aren't you? I know your current situation. For now, you're all scattered, and you've lost contact with many people." The muscles at the corners of his eyes twitched. "Intentionally or unintentionally," he said, "there's still no news about Qin Ku, right? Generally speaking, it would be good if all the 2,000 elites of Zhongzhou State survived. But among these 2,000 people, the teachers, students, and even his granddaughter, Qin Ku, were naturally the most important. But according to the news from East Island, Qin Ku was one of the first batch of people who lost contact, and there was still no news about her. This had even become the thing that worried Zhuang Huayang the most now. "Yes." Li Tianlan looked up at Zhuang Huayang and said in a calm tone. On the screen, Zhuang Huayang's pupils suddenly condensed, and his sharp eyes seemed to look directly into Li Tianlan's eyes through the screen. "It's not just Mr. Qin. I have news about many other people," Li Tianlan said calmly. Just now, he was still thinking about how to say the news euphemistically, so that when the higher-ups of Zhongzhou State might support him to a certain extent, he would not make them dislike him. However, this kind of thing didn't seem to be his forte at all. No matter how he thought about it, he still couldn't find the right words. A deal was a deal. No matter how nice it sounded, the essence would not change after all. When the higher-ups of Zhongzhou State were burning with anxiety about the 2,000 elites who sneaked into East Island, Li Tianlan traded their safety for his own interests. This was the essence, and it could not be changed. So Li Tianlan simply said that although he was the heir of the Li family, he could now be regarded as a member of the academics, and he had no conflict with Zhuang Huayang. If he let the academics handle this matter, he would get some benefits at most, but in general, it was worth it. "I'm now with Duke, Horsewoman, and Flaming Fire," Li Tianlan said slowly. "Simply put, I have mastered the channel of samsara. At present, samsara can know the whereabouts of about 1,200 elites, and it also has the strength to send people to meet them. For example, Yi Fengcheng, Mr. Qin Ku, Gu Yunxia, Gu Yulan, 3i. Zhuang Huayang stood up uncontrollably. In addition to the extreme shock in his eyes, there was only a touch of faint uneasiness. He was not surprised that Li Tianlan was with the 3 super masters of samsara. Based on Qin Weibai's attitude toward this guy and her attitude that she even wanted to give up her soul, the biggest task of the three super masters was probably to protect Li Tianlan, even if they had to give up all other tasks. What he was shocked about was Samsara's intelligence channel. In just a few days, they could know the whereabouts of more than 1,000 elites in the whole East Island. How much power did they need to use? How much manpower and resources did they need to use? The key was that this power seemed to have not been discovered by East Island yet. Samsara Palace. How could this superpower in the dark world with a short history have such powerful power? This power might not be able to overthrow East Island, but it was enough to suppress any force except the East Island officials. Any force. Vaguely, Zhuang Huayang keenly sensed that there seemed to be something wrong with the cooperation with Samsara this time, but he couldn't tell what was wrong. The master of Samsara Palace was in Zhongzhou State. Qin Weibai was in Zhongzhou State. Li Tianlan also belonged to Zhongzhou State. Everything seemed to be fine, but when he thought of the horrible power of Samsara in East Island, Zhuang Huayang felt more and more like he was asking a tiger for its skin. This time, the plot of Zhongzhou State with the whole nation's power, was it a blessing or a curse? These people, Zhuang Huayang's eyes were solemn. Is Samsara Palace sure that they can get them to Changdao? At least 80%. Li Tianlan's tone was calm. Zhuang Huayang's heart sank again. At least 80%. This power was almost beyond everyone's imagination. Headmaster, I really need this opportunity. When Zhuang Huayang was still thinking, Li Tianlan suddenly said in a serious tone. Huh? What did you say? Zhuang Huayang subconsciously glanced at Li Tianlan. I have the list in my hand and the channel of Samsara. This is an opportunity. I have to fight for something for myself. If you don't think I'm greedy, I want to ask you to help me. Li Tianlan's tone was getting calmer, but his eyes were shining with determination. Just now, he had seriously thought about the resources he had. At a glance, his resources were simply suffocatingly abundant. But when he thought about it carefully, the result was hard to make him happy. Now it seemed that his most stable and supportive resource was undoubtedly Samsara Palace. Qin Weibai was his woman. The master of Samsara Palace seemed to have some inexplicable relationship with the Li family. Samsara Palace was enough to be his strongest backer. But the most embarrassing thing was that Samsara Palace was a foreign force. They had no foundation in Zhongzhou State, and the Wang family of Beihai and Kunlun City would not allow this behemoth to develop in Zhongzhou State. If Li Tianlan was abroad in the future, everything might be smooth. But inside Zhongzhou State, the help that Samsara Palace could provide him was relatively limited and hidden. Of course, it was a matter of life and death. The master of Samsara Palace might still take action, but she could not be Li Tianlan's personal fighter, and Li Tianlan was not qualified. He went straight to Mount Dibbing. He challenged Gu Xingyun. The master of Samsara Palace had made her attitude toward him clear and declared force. When he returned to Zhongzhou State in the future, even if his identity was exposed, Wang Tianzong and Gu Xingyun would not do anything to him on the surface before they had full confidence to resist the revenge of Samsara Palace. But they could do something in the dark. Li Tianlan was not strong enough to be invincible under the invincible realm, and his foundation was extremely weak. In short, Kunlun City could find hundreds of ways to bypass Samsara Palace to attack Li Tianlan and make it difficult for the master of Samsara Palace to show up. When foreign forces couldn't enter Zhongzhou State, the master of Samsara Palace was the most powerful and the ultimate deterrent. And if Kunlun City really took action at all costs, Samsara Palace would retaliate crazily, and Zhongzhou State's attitude would be different. One was its own state-protecting war god, and the other was a foreign dark magnate. It was easy to tell who was close and who was distant. So in general, Samsara Palace could help Li Tianlan, but at most, it could protect him from being killed so easily. As for the academics, the two sides were purely cooperating, which meant that there was a possibility of falling out. There was even no need to fall out. As long as Li Tianlan was alive, the academics could protect him. But if Li Tianlan was killed, the academics would never have any conflict with the special warfare group because of a dead person. Dongqing clan. Li Tianlan now held the only sky attack of the Dongqing clan, but he never dared to regard this super wealthy family as one of his own. Dongqing Rushi was a problem. Before he figured out how to deal with Dongqing Rushi, Li Tianlan didn't even dare to think about whether he would be a friend or a foe of the Dongqing clan in the future. So after thinking about it, Sai City could give Li Tianlan the most powerful support. But the power of Sai City was also far inferior to that of Kunlun City and the Wang family of Beihai. Sai City and the Samsara Palace cooperated internally and externally, which could give Li Tianlan a chance to develop without being killed easily. But how to develop, in fact, depended on himself to a large extent. His foundation was the East Emperor Palace, a foundation that only belonged to him. Li Tianlan now had a backer, but he didn't dare to completely rely on the force behind him. He just wanted the East Emperor Palace to rise as fast as possible. The faster, the better. Even if the East Emperor Palace became the only throne in the Dark World in the next second, it would be better. The support of more than 1,000 people in exchange. And if he made good use of this great favor and network, when the plot of Zhongzhou State was over, the East Emperor Palace might have a solid foundation that could really take root in Zhongzhou State. What do you want? Zhuang Huayang narrowed his eyes and looked at Li Tianlan. His tone was extremely solemn. After all, what would happen to the Samsara in the future was still his imagination. But Li Tianlan could now be regarded as one of his own. His potential and origin were worthy of the academic's strong investment. This was the first time that Li Tianlan made a request to the academics, and he brought a big gift. The academics had no reason to refuse. 10 people. Li Tianlan's tone was resolute. I want to bring 10 soldiers from the border, and the academics will be responsible for their safety. 10 people. Zhuang Huayang's face changed dramatically, and he even smiled bitterly. This is absolutely impossible. 10 soldiers. How could Li Tianlan say that? It was shameless to the extreme. In terms of military rank. Many people in the Li family in the border camp were indeed just soldiers. But in terms of strength, many of them were real generals, and they were generals with real power. In recent years, the Li family's talents had withered. Now it was said that in addition to Li Honghe, an expert of the invincible realm, there was not even a half-step invincible realm expert. But the remaining more than 100 people were the elites of the elites. Zhuang Huayang was really not surprised to find 10 thunder-shocking realm experts from these people. 10 thunder-shocking realm experts. Not to mention whether the academics were willing or not, this kind of thing that needed to be discussed at the plenary meeting of the decision-making committee. Once it was submitted, he was afraid that Kunlun City and the Prince Group would desperately stop it. The possibility of success is too low. Unless Gu Xingyun is crazy, he will not agree. Zhuang Huayang shook his head. You and I both understand what it means to be responsible for their safety. This kind of thing has to go through Kunlun City, and Gu Xingyun has a lot of decision-making power. It was naturally easy to take 10 people out of the border. But being responsible for their safety did not mean that they could not die. At least, they should be arranged with a suitable official position as protective clothes. If these experts came out, they would be put in the special warfare system. If Kunlun City did not agree, the academics had no good way to deal with it. There are too many people. Zhuang Huayang continued, unless your father's treason case really has nothing to do with Kunlun City, Gu Xingyun will never let these people out. There will always be a way. Li Tianlan looked at Zhuang Huayang and said quietly. Wei, Zhuang Huayang muttered to himself and said in a low voice, do you have any powerful bargaining chips? For example, Gu Hanshan. Li Tianlan fell silent. He paid special attention to the information about Gu Hanshan, but obviously, there was no information about Gu Hanshan on the list for the time being. Not yet. Li Tianlan shook his head. At present, I only have information about Wang Xingxiao. Zhuang Huayang's eyes suddenly lit up. So you are going to talk to Wang Tianzong again? If the Southeast group and the academics join hands. Before he could finish his words, Li Tianlan interrupted him directly. No. I'm not going to talk to Wang Tianzong. Chapter 176. Li Tianlan was waiting for the news. It seemed that the only thing he could do now was to wait. In this general trend that swept the entire dark world and was about to break out in Changdao, there were plans between countries, fights between dark superpowers, frequent appearances of experts, and the shadows of invincible realm experts were getting more and more obvious. So far, it was almost out of everyone's control. Li Tianlan couldn't control the general trend. He was just the most ordinary participant, a participant with his own purpose. He was waiting for the Battle of Changdao to break out. He was waiting for the result from Zhongzhou State. He was even waiting for the news from Li Beidian and others. The more depressed he was, the calmer he was. In the spacious study, the curtains had been completely drawn, and the thick sunshade blocked the bright sunshine outside the window. There was no light in the room, and the thick darkness filled every corner of the room. Li Tianlan sat alone on the sofa. Waiting. He could only wait. He could feel the restlessness and unwillingness in his heart more and more clearly. Perhaps he was unprecedentedly small in front of the general trend. The smaller he was, the more Li Tianlan desired to be strong. To lead the general trend, to turn the clouds and rain, and to cover the sky with one hand. That desire was so strong that he was unwilling to be dominated and unwilling to be a pawn. During the few months he entered the human world, his mentality seemed to be changing every moment. Only his ambition was getting stronger and stronger. The darkness covered Li Tianlan's expression, as well as the wildfire-like craziness and heat in his eyes. A slightly dazzling light came in from outside the door. Li Tianlan subconsciously narrowed his eyes and looked outside the door. Duke's tall figure stood in the bright sunshine outside the door, smiling like the wind. The talk didn't go well. He paused at the door, walked into the room, and didn't choose to turn on the light after hesitating. The room was once again plunged into darkness. I don't know yet. I'm waiting for the result. Li Tianlan rubbed his forehead tiredly, thinking about his conversation with Zhuang Huayang just now. In fact, it was not difficult to bring 10 border soldiers to Huading, and he didn't need to ask anyone. But for the sake of safety, he had to arrange a job for them that could protect themselves, at least so that Kunlun City couldn't kill them easily. That was the most difficult thing. The academics was the ruling group today, but the academics was a rising force in Zhongzhou State. Most of them were ordinary political figures who did not have prominent backgrounds. It was only with the success of their leader, President Li Huacheng, that they became what they are today. At present, the academic strength in the special warfare system of Zhongzhou State was extremely weak. As for the military, although they occupied the highest leadership positions, they were not superior in terms of strength, and were even slightly weaker. Both the Prince Group and the Wang family of Beihai had deep-rooted influence in the military. Li Tianlan wanted to bring 10 people from the Li family to Huading, which meant he had to ask the academics for 10 positions in the special warfare group or the military, and they were not low positions. Even if the academy was willing to help him, it would not be easy. Fortunately, Li Tianlan had enough chips in his hand. This opportunity was what he needed, but wasn't it what the academics needed? The first term of the academics in power was about to expire, and they also needed a certain opportunity to enhance their strength. However, such a game tested the political wisdom of the big shots. Li Tianlan was not qualified to participate in it, so he chose to give the chips to the academics. As for the final result, he would soon get a clear result. I asked for 10 experts from the Li Consortium to be transferred from the border and given them security. Do you think there's a possibility of success? Li Tianlan suddenly asked. In the dark, neither of them could see each other's expressions, but their tones were extremely calm. Very smart. Duke commented subconsciously, with a smile in his tone. At this stage, money and power were not the most important things for Li Tianlan. The most important thing was the foundation and the influence. If these 10 experts could come out from the border and be given positions by Zhongzhou State again, then at least in Huading, Li Tianlan's foundation would not be weak. Duke could vaguely feel Li Tianlan's inner restlessness, but it was clear that Li Tianlan was still calm and rational, and he did not let it get to his head. But 10 people should be a bit too many. Duke thought for a while and said, during this time, the academics should get some positions to prepare for the change in 2 years. These are all positions that they snatched from other groups bit by bit. Give 10 to the Li Consortium. He shook his head subconsciously, obviously not optimistic about the result this time. 5 at most. He was silent for a while, and then he said with certainty. Li Tianlan was silent for a while and didn't say more about this topic. He just ordered calmly, arranged to meet Wang Shengshao. In any case, make sure that he arrives in Changdao safely. Oh. Duke's eyes lit up slightly. Have you talked to the Wang family of Beihai? Not anymore. Li Tianlan's tone was calm. There's nothing to talk about. The Wang family of Beihai is not Zhongzhou State. In the dark, the two were silent for a while. After about a minute, Duke's voice continued to ring. Okay, I'll arrange it right away. In the dark, he stood up and walked out of the door. They could hear each other's voices, but they couldn't see each other's expressions. They knew each other, but they didn't know each other. The room became dark again. The big screen hanging on the wall lit up silently, and then a video communication from Zhongzhou State came over. Li Tianlan, who had just lit a cigarette, slightly shook his body, and immediately answered the call. On the big screen, Zhuang Huayang's tired face appeared. In the dark, Li Tianlan's face turned into a strange livid color under the light of the screen, looking deep and cold. The two looked at each other slightly. 3 people. Zhuang Huayang said slowly, Tianlan, I just talked to the chief on the phone. In principle, he agrees with your request, but 10 people are too many. 3 people is the limit we can strive for. Not the 5 people that Duke expected. Only 3 people. Li Tianlan frowned slightly. The number was far from what he had expected. Don't frown so soon. Zhuang Huayang smiled. Although there are only 3 people, the chief also has a surprise for you. You may not know, but just a few days ago, the chief went to the border in person and met Senior Li. Li Tianlan suddenly looked up and looked at Zhuang Huayang with burning eyes. What did the chief say to my grandfather? Li Tianlan asked in a hoarse voice. I don't know the details, but the chief brought back a man from the border, named Li Wangsheng. Zhuang Huayang's tone revealed a little smile. You should know him, right? This person isn't one of the 3 people you've chosen. In addition, old Yu has been silent for so many years, so he should have a position. The chief wants him to go to the Eastern Theater of Operations. I don't know the specific position, but it should not be too low. That makes 5 people, right? Yu Donglai went to the Eastern Theater of Operations. Li's village could send 3 people. And Li Wangsheng, a smile gradually appeared on Li Tianlan's face. Of course, he knew Li Wangsheng, a brother who grew up with him. In Li Tianlan's original plan, no matter how many people he could bring back from the border, Li Wangsheng must be one of them. He was a genius in the true sense. Although he did not have the wind and thunder veins, the heavenly king heart, and the exquisite bone, what he had been exposed to since he was a child were the core unique skills of the Li family. Moreover, he was extremely strong-willed. Most importantly, the appearance of Li Wangsheng meant that he really had a confidant beside him besides Qin Weibai who he could trust without reservation. This feeling was very warm and exciting. Thank the chief for me. Li Tianlan looked at Zhuang Huayang and said calmly. We're on the same side. No need to be so polite. But the chief likes Li Wangsheng very much. As for his arrangement, well, let's talk about it when you come back. Zhuang Huayang shook his head, and then his face became solemn. Comrade Tianlan, Zhongzhou State asks you to use the channel of Samsara right now and bring all our elites to Changdao. You have a week at most. The higher-ups don't have a clear order for your rescue operation, but they ask you to protect the lives of our people as much as possible. Can you do that? Li Tianlan felt a little weird, but in such an atmosphere, he subconsciously straightened up, gave a military salute, and said loudly, yes. Besides, I have news for you. Zhuang Huayang smiled and waved his hand, motioning Li Tianlan to relax. The second group of people of the Snowdance Corps will arrive in Changdao in a few days. Since you have the channel, how about you arrange their accommodation? He paused and then said with a bitter smile, after all, some of our strongholds in East Island of Zhongzhou State are almost destroyed. No problem. Li Tianlan nodded. This kind of reception seemed simple, but in fact, it was also a favor. When the Snowdance Corps entered East Island, the first group leader was Tribulation. How could the second group leader be weak? Receiving such a person was also good for building his network. Li Tianlan had no reason to refuse. Headmaster, who is leading the team this time? Li Tianlan asked casually, intending to know in advance. Which group does he belong to? Zhuang Huayang's face froze. He hesitated, shook his head, and said, he doesn't belong to any group. He is only responsible for the overall situation of Zhongzhou State. He is a real neutral figure. And this person has now been officially appointed as the first deputy commander of the Snowdance Corps. He will take over Tribulation's position and control all the elites of Zhongzhou State in East Island. A neutral figure? Li Tianlan became more and more curious. In the action of the dark world where strength was respected, a neutral figure could take over Tribulation's position. What was his strength? An invincible realm expert? Are there any hidden invincible realm experts in Zhongzhou State? No. Zhuang Huayang shook his head. He hasn't reached the invincible realm yet, but he is recognized as the first person under the invincible realm in the dark world. Don't be unconvinced. I know that Tribulation is also very strong. In terms of strength, he may not be weaker than him, but Tribulation still lacks some achievements. This person seriously injured an invincible realm expert on the Holy List 3 years ago. With such achievements and such a title, he deserves it. He was not an invincible realm expert, but he seriously injured a real invincible realm expert. Li Tianlan's eyes flickered and shone brightly. Who is this person? One of the 4 spirits of Zhongzhou State, General of 9 Heavens Gongsun Qi, codenamed Azure Dragon. Zhuang Huayang said indifferently, he is one of the 4 captains of the Terracotta Army of Zhongzhou State, and he is the first captain. The 4 spirits of Zhongzhou State? Li Tianlan raised his eyebrows in surprise. He knew the 4 gods of Zhongzhou State, but he had never heard of the 4 spirits. But he heard horsewomen talk about the Terracotta Army. Wang Xingxiao, Gu Hanshan, and even Jiang Shangyu seemed to be fighting for a quarter of the leadership of the Terracotta Army. The reputation of the 4 spirits is naturally not as good as that of the 4 gods of Zhongzhou State. This title refers to the 4 captains of the Terracotta Army, Azure Dragon, White Tiger, Vermilion Bird, and Black Tortoise. To some extent, they are all real neutral figures. They are, knock, knock, knock. Before Zhuang Huayang finished speaking, there was a sudden knock on the door. Come in. Li Tianlan said casually. The door was pushed open from the outside. Horsewoman's plump and charming figure stood quietly outside the door. She glanced at Zhuang Huayang on the screen, shrugged slightly, and said with a smile, sorry. But I have a piece of news here, which should be the most important thing to you. She paused and continued, we have got the whereabouts of Li Badian and the others. Li Tianlan suddenly turned around and strode to the door without hesitation. Where are they? Chapter 177. In this war, if there was anyone that Li Tianlan cared about, it was undoubtedly the backbone members of the East Emperor Palace. The grinning Li Badian and the taciturn Ning Qianqing were not bad friends, but true friends who could be brothers for life and death. It was their luck that the 3 of them met each other. Li Tianlan had no way to deal with them before, but now he had the exact information. No matter what, Li Tianlan had to bring them back. There was also Yu Qinyan. Starting from Yu Donglai, Yu Shi had really dedicated everything to the Li family. If something happened to Yu Qinyan in East Island, Li Tianlan really dared not imagine how big a blow it would be to Yu Donglai. Dongqing Rushi was his nominal fiancé. No matter what would happen to the engagement with the Dongqing clan, at least the Dongqing clan gave him real support. Because of this, Li Tianlan had to protect the second miss of the Dongqing clan. Where are they? Maybe because he stayed in the dark for too long, the soft light outside made Li Tianlan feel a little dazzling. He raised his hand to block it and asked calmly. Zhongjing. Horsewoman glanced at Li Tianlan, her beautiful and dignified eyebrows slightly frowned, and said slowly, "About an hour ago, our partners got the news that they have been in Zhongjing recently." They have been in Zhongjing? Li Tianlan was a little surprised. Zhongjing was about 400 kilometers away from Changdao. Judging from the current situation, Zhongjing could be regarded as the rear of East Island. Because according to the information he got, a large number of elites of Zhongzhou state broke through the encirclement at the slowest to Ninghu. Li Baidian and the others, why didn't they break through? They are not weak. Li Tianlan whispered to himself. There were 6 people in Li Baidian's group. 2 were from Mount Shu, and 3 were from Jade Pool. Yu Qinyan was weak, but her poison was unparalleled on the battlefield. Although there were no thunder-shocking realm experts in this group, ordinary thunder-shocking realm experts could not stop them. Someone must have deliberately kept them in Zhongjing. In other words, they were trapped. Horsewoman thought about the information she got. After a short hesitation, she decided to tell the truth. At least an hour ago, they were still being chased. Led by 2 experts at the peak of the thunder-shocking realm, there were nearly 100 experts and elites in other realms. The situation was very dangerous. She spoke carefully and observed Li Tianlan's expression at the same time. No worries. There was no anger. There was no irritation. What Li Tianlan exuded was complete calmness and rationality that bordered on cruelty. Can you provide support? He lit a cigarette and took a deep drag. He suddenly asked. The knight hesitated and smiled bitterly. Zhongjing is the base camp of Limitless Palace. It is also one of the few cities that our partners are unable to infiltrate. All these years, there is only one dark force in Zhongjing, and that is Limitless Palace. Its existence is the only one. Our partner only has a small number of intelligence investigators in Chukio, and most of them have no combat power. Li Tianlan spat out the smoke in his mouth, nodded, and said without hesitation, "Prepare the car. Now to Zhongjing." "You're going in person?" The knight froze for a moment. Li Tianlan had already turned around and strode out of the villa. "You and Duke come with me. Flaming fire stays." Now he didn't want to waste a second. Before he finished speaking, he had already walked down the stairs of the villa and went straight to the lush courtyard outside the villa. He was swift and decisive. In less than 10 minutes, a high-powered car directly left the courtyard and entered the area of the club where they were hiding. Finally, it went down the mountain from the back door of the club and went straight to Zhongjing. In the back seat of the car, Li Tianlan smoked silently and said nothing. "I still object to you taking the risk yourself." Duke drove himself. In the roar of the engine, he drove faster and faster, and his face became serious. "This is very likely to be a trap." Duke said, "Everyone else is breaking out of the encirclement. There is no reason for East Island to trap a team that has strength but can't affect the overall situation in East Island. The most important thing is that this situation seems to have lasted for a few days. What do you want to say?" Li Tianlan asked faintly. His performance had been very rational and calm as ice, but the speed of his smoking kept increasing. One could vaguely see his inner eagerness. What he wants to say is that your friend's strength isn't that terrible. How did they escape the encirclement for a few days? 2 superiors of the thunder-shocking realm and hundreds of elites. For the current East Island, this kind of power absolutely can't be wasted casually. But such a power chasing a few young people didn't get any results. Obviously, East Island doesn't want to kill them so soon. Horsewoman looked out of the window and said softly. At the beginning, when she got the news, she also hesitated whether to tell Li Tianlan the news or not. After all, this thing was full of weirdness, and no matter how she looked at it, it seemed like a trap. But in the end, she decided to tell the truth. Because if this was a trap, the other side always had a way to let Li Tianlan know the news, so it was better to prepare early. I think the same as Horsewoman. Duke drove the car and said quickly, the reason why East Island didn't kill them is that they are waiting, and it's very likely that they are waiting for you. It's not too difficult for East Island to find the newly established East Emperor Palace, and the relationship between you and the boss is not a secret. If they just want to lure you there to threaten Samsara, then this action. Duke moved the corner of his mouth and sighed. You shouldn't go. If it's just to save your friend, Horsewoman, and I can go there. Just because it's a trap, I have to go there. Li Tianlan said faintly. The inside of the car suddenly fell into silence. After a full 5 minutes, Horsewoman sitting in the co-driver's seat sighed faintly and said, You don't trust us? This has nothing to do with trust. Li Tianlan twitched the corner of his mouth and said with a smile, You think too much. This had nothing to do with trust, it was just about standpoint. Qin Weibai could ask the super masters of Samsara to protect her with all their strength, not because of her amazing potential. To put it bluntly, it was all because he was Qin Weibai's man, that was all. She asked the super masters of Samsara to protect her man, but she would never ask the super masters of Samsara to protect her man's friend at all costs. The super masters of Samsara were not so cheap. So even if he knew that there might be a trap ahead, Li Tianlan had to go, because only when he was there could he be sure that Duke and Horsewoman would do their best at all costs. Horsewoman turned her head, took a deep look at Li Tianlan, and said no more. Zhongjing, that's not a fun place. Fortunately, Tianhai Wuji is trapped in Zhongzhou State. Otherwise, Zhongjing is simply a black hole for other forces in the dark world. Even without Tianhai Wuji, we should have taken Flaming Fire with us just now, so that we have more confidence. Duke suddenly said. Flaming Fire has other tasks. Li Tianlan shook his head and lit another cigarette. The second batch of elites of the Snowdance Corps is about to arrive in Chengdao, and their concealment needs to be handled by Flaming Fire. Duke nodded and said thoughtfully, the second batch. It seems that Zhongzhou State has to speed up. But it's right. The current situation can't be delayed any longer. I just don't know who will lead the team this time. It's a neutral figure. Li Tianlan's heart skipped a beat, and he said softly, Do you know the 4 spirits of Zhongzhou State? The 4 spirits generals? Which one will lead the team this time? Azure Dragon or White Tiger? Duke was stunned, and then he suddenly whistled. Even the Terracotta Army has appeared. It seems that Zhongzhou State has invested a lot this time. The leader this time is Azure Dragon Gongsun Qi, known as General of 9 Heavens, one of the 4 captains of the Terracotta Army. Li Tianlan answered Duke's question, but his eyes were looking at Horsewoman. You said that this time Wang Xingxiao and Gu Hanshan are fighting for a quarter of the leadership of the Terracotta Army? As far as I know, the 4 spirits should be neutral figures, right? Theoretically, yes. Horsewoman nodded. But there's something unexpected this time. Among the 4 spirits generals, one has a clear position. Li Tianlan looked at her quietly, waiting for her to continue. Today's 4 spirits generals of Zhongzhou State are Gongsun Qi, General of 9 Heavens, codenamed Azure Dragon. General of 9 Serenities, Shang, codenamed White Tiger. General of 9 Heavens, Yi, codenamed Vermilion Bird. Horsewoman said slowly, Gongsun Qi, Shang, and Yi, these 3 generals are absolutely neutral figures. But the 4th one is not. The last one of the 4 spirits is Jiang Shan, General of 9 Regions, codenamed Black Tortoise. Jiang Shan. Li Tianlan suddenly raised his eyebrows. Which Jiang Shan? Naturally, it's Jiang Shan, the leader of Beijiang province, the father of Jiang Shangyu. This time, it's also him who will step down from the position of the four spirits. Horsewoman said flatly, the last black tortoise died in the battle in Beijiang 5 years ago. In recent years, the situation in Beijiang has been sensitive, so this position was won by Jiang Shan. He was originally a transitional figure, but in the past 5 years, he has done a good job, so no one has ever touched him. Jiang Shan himself is a member of the decision-making committee of Zhongzhou State, and now he is the general of 9 regions, holding a quarter of the Terracotta Army. His words are more confident than most members of the decision-making committee. If he hadn't violated the rules this time, he might not necessarily step down from this position. Violated the rules? It's just an excuse. When he took the position, some people were reluctant. Don't forget what time it was 5 years ago. Now everything is almost stable, and it's time to counterattack. Who is willing to let Jiang Shan continue in this position? Duke suddenly interrupted in a playful tone. Li Tianlan was thoughtful. 5 years ago, it should be a critical period for the academics and the prince group to replace the old. Duke meant that Jiang Shan could sit in the position of one of the four spirits because the academics made concessions? Was it also because of the academics that Jiang Shan was going to step down this time? But even if Jiang Shan stepped down, the current competitors were Gu Hanshan and Wang Xingxiao. Jiang Shangyu was also qualified to compete because of his relationship with Jiang Shan. Of these 3 candidates, the academics were willing to see each of them. There was no doubt that the power of other groups caused this result. If one didn't participate in this kind of fight between immortals, outsiders would never know. Li Tianlan didn't want to think too much about it. He just said casually, Gu Hanshan and Wang Xingxiao are not qualified to participate in the fight for Spirit Tortoise, are they? Their strength is not a problem. Horsewoman shook her head. The 4 spirits are now all superiors of the half-step invincible realm, but they haven't been transformed, so they need to be replaced. It's not a big problem to take this opportunity to replace them with a young man. As for the position, the 4 spirits are neutral, but how can anyone be absolutely neutral? Therefore, Zhongzhou State also gave the 4 spirits a restriction, that is, they could not express their views on anything in the country. Jiang Shan's current position is so sensitive because he holds several positions. Once he speaks, the issue of position does not have too many restrictions on him, which is the last thing the higher-ups want to see. This time, it is said that Jiang Shan privately used the Terracotta Army to do things, which violated the rules, so he was caught, otherwise. Horsewoman didn't continue, but Li Tianlan understood what she meant. An absolutely neutral position seemed to be useless, but it was the best position to quickly accumulate prestige and connections. The 4 spirits only dealt with external affairs, not internal affairs. Therefore, they wouldn't get into too many domestic disputes and interests, and it was easy to be recognized by others with the accumulation of contributions. Whether Wang Xingxiao or Gu Hanshan sat in this position, 10 years later when they entered the invincible realm and accumulated enough prestige, what would the situation be like? How ambitious they are! Li Tianlan sneered and said, they have a long-term vision. Of course. Whether it is Wang Tianzong or Gu Xingyun, they are all ambitious. How can ambitious people limit their vision to what is in front of them? Duke smiled and said. Li Tianlan closed his eyes and kept silent. Vaguely, he seemed to have seen the plan of the Wang family of Beihai and Kunlun City. 20 years ago, the position of the war god of Zhongzhou State belonged to the Li family, and the Wang family of Beihai couldn't fight for it. His father suddenly died that year, and Gu Xingyun took advantage of the situation to ascend the position. In the face of the general trend, the Wang family of Beihai couldn't go against nature and could only acquiesce to this result. But what about today, 20 years later? The position of the war god was now in the hands of Kunlun City. How could the Wang family of Beihai not fight for it? Why not? But Kunlun City didn't want to give up either. Jiang Shan broke the rules and wanted to retire, and no one should object except the prince group. The position of spirit tortoise was replaced by new blood, in order to push Gu Hanshan or Wang Xingshao up. In this respect, the Wang family of Beihai and Kunlun City must have secretly made efforts to make Jiang Shan abdicate. But now the academics couldn't find a candidate who could compete with Wang Xingshao and Gu Hanshan. Li Tianlan might be one, but his combat strength was strong, but his realm was low. No matter how the terracotta army replaced new blood, it didn't need to replace an ice-condensing realm expert. In addition, the academics sensed the competition between Kunlun City and the Wang family of Beihai and didn't want to get involved, so they simply chose to swallow the loss, or find a way out. That was the fact. The academics was the main force and let Jiang Shan retire. But before they had time to recommend one of their own, the big peach was taken away by the Wang family of Beihai and Kunlun City. One of the four spirits of Zhongzhou State. Controlling the strongest super force in Zhongzhou State, and in a position where it was the easiest to accumulate reputation and credit. It was no exaggeration to say that the winner between Gu Hanshan and Wang Xingshao in this competition might be directly related to the ownership of the next war god. The two were fighting for the position of the war god, which was the advancement and retreat of the two super forces in the future 10 years later. No wonder, no wonder. Li Tianlan's eyes flickered and he sneered. Wang Xingshao. Gu Hanshan. Whoever could compete for the position of spirit tortoise would be closer to the position of the war god, and the other would be farther away from the position of the war god. But in the same way, Li Tianlan would be farther away from that position. It was in Li Tianlan's best interest that neither of them could get the position. He had to think of a way. He had to. Zhongzhou State's plan. The Battle of Chengdao. What about after that? Since the trip to East Island had become a test for Gu Hanshan and Wang Xingshao. Since they wanted to destroy their ideas. They had to figure out Zhongzhou State's plan. All disputes were nothing more than interests. Li Tianlan absolutely didn't believe that Zhongzhou State sent them here just to kill people. That was meaningless. So, I'm curious. Li Tianlan suddenly said, "This is East Island. Since we entered East Island, what we've been doing seems to be killing people. Does it make sense? Why does Zhongzhou State think that when everything is over, we can violate the will of East Island within its territory and let the dark world of East Island belong to us? In the end, what on earth can we get? The territory belongs to East Island, the people belong to East Island, and the channels belong to East Island." He paused and said with a self-mocking smile, "We can't retreat after killing people, right? I can't figure out how we can stand firm in East Island. That's because you haven't seen the real general trend of the dark world." Horsewoman smiled and said softly, "It's a warrior's business to serve the country wholeheartedly and move forward. The thoughts of politicians, businessmen, and ordinary people are the most difficult to capture." You're tuning into the Romantic Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.